What's up? What's happening? Welcome into the Take Command pregame show. We are live at Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. Happy to be back this week. Appreciate Denton Day filling in last week, Logan. But we got a good one coming up today in Denver. 4:25 kick on CBS. The Commanders will take on the Denver Broncos. Of course, the Broncos are favored in this game. They are 3.5-point favorites. Although they come in 0-1, the Commanders come in 1-0, Logan. And they do that as we dive right into the breakdown. Of course, Kevin Sheehan will join us at the bottom of this hour. But they do that despite a funky turnover stat from last week. It is not often you lose the turnover battle and win the game, or win the turnover battle and lose the game. But that is what happened to both teams last week. Commanders survived some turnovers. Broncos on the right end of the turnovers, wrong end of the game. And yet here we are, Commanders 1-0, Broncos 0-1 going into this one.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, every week on the show, Santana Moss says that, the most important thing about winning the game is winning the turnover battle. And obviously that's extremely important because you add possessions, you get more opportunities, you get your defense in better positions, all those types of things. But, man, I just think, last week, the Commanders, they were playing a better ball team. You know what I mean? Or they were the better football team, excuse me. And so it allowed them to kind of overcome some of those mistakes. And I thought aggressive play calling also played a huge factor in that. So, when you watch that Denver game versus Las Vegas, it's a very different dynamic. The conservativeness of Sean Payton and Joe Lombardi in that game, I think really kind of highlights the razor's edge they're walking each week. And I think, that's one of the reasons they're looking at the wrong side of that turnover situation. It's a very, very conservative approach. It'll be really curious to see. I'm really, really excited. The more you cover, the more you talk about a game, the more you're kind of I wonder what actually happens. And I wonder if they're just a tick more aggressive this week, if they find those opportunities a little bit more reticently, if the relationship between Russell and Cortland Sutton's a little bit better. Like I said on the podcast this week, they missed some explosive opportunities, and that would have been the difference for them in winning and losing that game. Also, got to point out the kicker. Missed the PAT, missed a field goal. The Denver probably should have won that game. They should have won that game, but obviously didn't fall for them. So. Yep,
and talk about explosive plays. They'll get Jerry Jeudy back today, which is a huge, huge deal for them. Which, as you mentioned, also missing kicks. Really good way to cost yourself. You hold the opponent to 17, you lose the game. It's probably because your kicker didn't do you any favors. There's a ton of familiar faces in this game. On the player side, you got a guy like Samaje Perine who used to be here. A very different player than when he was here. We can talk about that a little bit later. But on the coaching side, you mentioned Joe Lombardi and Sean Payton. They obviously saw Ron Rivera twice a year, many, many years in a row when they were in New Orleans and Ron was in Carolina. And then Denver, Kansas City produced the Eric Bieniemy Vance Joseph matchup year after year after year after year. So when whether it's a divisional opponent when you were here in Washington and you'd play Philly or you'd play New York or whatever, or there was some kind of familiarity for you as a player or with your coaches and the opposite sideline, how does that factor into a game?
Well, I mean, there's all these relationships around the league, that you have or that I have as a player where you're like, oh my gosh, I really feel comfortable going against this defense because it's been the same defensive coordinator for 4 years. I know they like to do this on first and second down. I know the run calls. I know the run combinations I'm looking for. I know the pressures they're going to call. So as a player, it's awesome. It's awesome when you get that familiarity because it lets you play fast and aggressive, which is ultimately what you're trying to do. It's so funny. I went back and looked at, you mentioned EB and Joseph. Yeah. And the last time they played was the first week of last year. He was the defensive coordinator for Arizona. And Kansas City got after them. Absolutely got after them. So I do think there's an element of confidence if you're the play caller, if you're EB in this situation, because you're like, the last time I saw this guy, we absolutely dominated. The other thing that I always think about from a coaching standpoint that I think is really fascinating is what do you change? Because Joseph's going to change some stuff because he got taken behind the woodshed and whooped, right? Yeah. So what does he do differently in this game? Is he a little bit less aggressive with his man-to-man coverage calls? Is he a little bit more aggressive with pressure, or is he a little less aggressive? Week one, he's kind of known for bringing lots of pressure. Only 10 pressures in the whole game, which is not a super high pressure rate for a guy like him. So, is he kind of being more conservative? Does he not like his personnel? Is Sean Payton saying something to him? So I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic because they do know each other, but obviously, at least based on week one, which is one data point, so not enough to make any vast conclusions, something's different. And so how does he approach Sam Howell? Does he bring more pressure? What does he do? So even though there is that familiarity there with Vance Joseph and EB, I think it's going to look and feel a little bit different, I would say, today.
So you say that about week 1 last year. I got an even better stat.
What do we got?
I asked Parker Gabriel, who's the Broncos beat reporter for the Denver Post on my show on Thursday, hey, what is the history here? How has it gone for Vance Joseph against Eric Bieniemy? And he goes, he's never beaten him.
Yeah.
So for week 1 last year, Cardinals, sure. Oh, it could be different. No, Vance Joseph's going to do what he's going to do. And when Eric Bieniemy had Patrick Mahomes, it went horribly for him.
Yeah.
Literally, when that matchup has been a thing for Denver, Kansas City, they being Vance Joseph's teams, have never beaten Eric Bieniemy's teams since Patrick Mahomes showed up in Kansas City. Now, Sam Howell is not Patrick Mahomes,
Correct.
a thing we've said many times before, and
Sure.
we'll continue to say probably for the rest of time, as Mahomes is on perhaps a track to be the greatest quarterback who's ever played the game, with all due respect to Sam. But it seems like Vance Joseph is going to do what he does, or whatever version is of that particular year, and Eric Bieniemy is going to have a beat on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's looked like. And obviously I haven't gone back and watched the Denver stuff because he was there in 2017. Does that sound right?
I think, and prior, because he was the D.C. first,
Correct.
and then he was the head
He took
coach.
over for Jack, right? Is that
if I'm remembering correctly, yeah.
So it took over for Jack. So it's been a couple years, and obviously that was like when Kansas City was at the peak of their powers, with Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. And
You say that like they still are not.
Well, I mean, just a different. It's a little different dynamic now.
Of course.
And obviously Patrick Mahomes is maybe the best player in the history of football, which is not an exaggeration. So that's going to sway the effectiveness of that offense in those situations 100%. But I'd be curious, like when you're in a competitive matchup like that, you got to kind of look at yourself and say, like, what I have been doing is not working. And last year they came out and ran a lot of man coverage. They were very aggressive. They brought a lot of pressure. And obviously Patrick Mahomes is a different animal than Sam Howell. But I look at it and I say to myself, like, what are you going to do different? Like, because obviously that's not working. And obviously, like, because of the new pieces and stuff, it'll feel like a totally different game plan. But to your point, like, obviously, like, the relationship has not been great between the two of them for Joseph, because EB's been doing such a good job. So
clean up aisle me on the fact check. He was the DC in Miami and then took over in Denver 2017, 2018 as the head coach before being the DC in Arizona the entirety of Cliff Kingsbury's 4-year run. Again, we're live at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor, where you hear some Raiders fans in the background. We'll keep you updated on the scores all day long. First touchdown of the day goes to Devontae Adams on a little screen pass. They are up 7-0 on Buffalo.
Craig getting after it over here.
I know, it's not quite 17. That would be a heck of an achievement for 3 minutes into the football game. I got some Ravens fans in the house too. Obviously the burgundy and gold jersey starting to show up here at MGM National Harbor. Ravens driving right now, and we'll keep you updated on everything. A full scoreboard recap coming up in the next hour of the show. Of course, the other big headline from this game this week, Logan, is that Chase Young will make his season debut. I actually think Ron and whoever else is talking to the media off the record as a source, because if you go to journalism school, those are two different things, kids. Off the record, you can't talk about it at all. Source says, you just got to say a source said it. So whoever's talking,
is that how that works?
Yes.
I didn't know
if
that.
you're off the record, that can never make the air in any form.
Seriously? I feel like I've heard people say, like, someone told me off the record.
Yeah, it's because they don't know what they're doing. If they say that into a microphone, that's bad.
That's bad. Bad luck.
Yeah, but with Chase, whoever was talking out of the building in Ashburn, whether it was to Ben Stanig or John Keim or anybody else on the beat, they were like, hey, maybe week 3.
Yeah.
And they really took the pressure off after so often feeling like they were almost pushing Chase back out there. The doctors then, to our surprise, because of all that reporting, clear him on Friday. What do we expect from Chase in his debut in Denver?
I'm sorry, I just saw Morgan Moses just kill a DB, which is always fun to see. Anyway, let's talk about Chase. So in terms of expectation, man, like, he had an excellent training camp. He had 4 rushes in the Cleveland game, and all of them looked excellent. And, Wills, the left tackle for Cleveland, is not, I'd say he's probably a top 20 player at the position. So not great, but not bad. Pretty good metric, I think. And so I'm just so excited, man, because, like, when you go back and watch his film from his rookie year, you see a guy who's still kind of figuring out, but is dominant physically and has this knack for kind of making splash plays. And like I did a breakdown with Santana and Fred, and they were like, who he reminds me of a little bit, just from like a playmaking standpoint, is Sean Taylor. And because he had this knack for kind of like the big moments. You remember against Arizona, the fumble recovery return for a touchdown, the fumble against Denver where he punches it out in like that 4-minute situation and gives the offense one more chance. They don't capitalize, but that was something really, really special he was doing pretty consistently. The hit on Joe Burrow at the goal line. And so I think, obviously last year was not healthy. The year prior to that was not quite himself, I don't think either, because he got hurt week 7, didn't really get to show anything. So I'm just, based on what he's shown this offseason, I just am so excited for that physical freak, the guy that I remember watching his tape of in college, doing that evaluation on and being like, this dude is maybe the best football player I've watched in college. And I want to see that same guy now. So in terms of expectation, I don't know what my expectations are. I expect him to look productive. I don't know how many reps he's going to get. I expect he's probably going to play more than what the staff has said because that's just how it goes,
Right.
Anytime they're like, he's on a pitch count, he's on a pitch count.
Yeah, how'd that go in San Francisco last year?
Yeah, you get him out there, and it's like, he's a physical freak. We want him on the field as much as possible. So I expect him to look good. I expect him to look sharp because he looked good and he looked sharp during practice. He looked good and looked sharp during his minutes during the preseason games. And so, I always go back to what you say. With the test he was given, he passed it, right?
Right.
And I expect him to continue to do well with that. And so just adding him into that group, the Payne, Allen, Sweat, who played so well week 1, I just think it's going to add another uptick. And hopefully the one thing I would say that I'm just kind of a little bit wary of is how disciplined can he be against Russell Wilson.
That was going to be my point, and we'll talk about this obviously in more depth later in the show, but we also talked about it a ton this week on the podcast. If you are not subscribed to the Take Command podcast, you get in-depth analysis like this, but at podcast link, not at radio link. So make sure you do that. We're out 3 times a week, including our post-game show, which we'll stream live tonight after the game, about 90 minutes after the final whistle. Logan and I will be back on YouTube. So for those of you watching on the Team 980 or 106.7 The Fans YouTube page, see you back here after the game. But we talked about that discipline that Young has to show this week, and it's something that is his – it was his weakness in 2021 before he got hurt is playing within the scheme.
Sure.
And it's something that James Smith-Williams in
Casey
particular, but Casey Tuhill also.
All those backup guys. F.A. does a good job with it.
Great job of it. But
obviously, if he's not playing today.
Yeah, but those 2 guys last week showed the value of that as you push a quarterback like Russell Wilson up into a shrinking pocket and let Allen, Sweat, and Payne eat. We'll get to that more later on in the show. When we get back, we flip sides of the ball, though, and take a look at Sam Howell and how he matches up with this Denver defense. Howell has had a proclivity, not just in the pros, but in college to take sacks. Is that a long-term problem, and especially a problem this week? We will look at that next. Here it is the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. When you look at Sam Howell's day, there's obviously some good, there's obviously some yikes. When you look at his decision-making, though, let's start there, and then we'll get into some of the protection issues. But decision-making wise and kind of how he executed the throws that he was asked to, what'd you make of his day?
Yeah, so I don't want to come off like I'm being overly optimistic about Sam Howell's performance. I want to ground this in some sense of reality. Can he play better? Absolutely. But I actually thought he played pretty good. You know what I mean? It was a good first outing. I know he had the pick. I know he had the fumble. The pick, I thought we just watched that together, and I think that he was, just a little bit later. His footwork was a little bit off. It just didn't seem like the timing of the depth of the route matched up with his feet necessarily. And because he's waiting so long to throw the football, obviously the ball gets tipped and then gets picked off. And then on the sack force fumble, I don't necessarily think that's anybody's fault. I think, obviously Wiley gives up the sack, but that's a great rush by Gardeck right there at number 45 for the Arizona Cardinals on the spin move. And it's a tough look. The guard and Wiley are kind of on different levels and leaves a little bit of space for the inside move. And then Sam's just trying to make a play probably when he needs to know that, I don't need to do that right there.
Yeah, that would be my thing on the fumble is that the fumble is bad because time score situation. You got to be okay punting, and you just got to. It's not to your blind side. You saw it coming. Just eat the football and make sure that you get it onto the foot of Tressway there.
Yeah, and I think we both agree with that. And I think that's what you get though with young players. You get I think that people forget. People want him to come out and be this amazing football player right away. and I think he's doing a pretty good job.
Last guy to mention real quick, Antonio Gibson. How concerned are we about the fumble?
I mean, it is concerning because it just seems to be like a consistent thing with him. You know, like I like him. I like him as a player. I think I like him as a person. He's awesome around the building and stuff. But like in any offense, like ball security is job security. Like that is something that is so important. And for that fumble to come in the red zone, like as you're going in to score, it is a big deal. And he's running hard, like he's doing everything you want. I think he makes a nice cut on that, but I think he's going to get less touches. You know, like if that continues to be an issue. And EB's always been very good, at least in my experience with him, about coming back to guys after they have an issue. You know, and Gibson catches the screen in the fourth quarter that ends up being like I think it was an 11-yard gain.
Yeah, it should have been a first down.
Right.
The referees decided that they were going to have a terrible day, so it wasn't.
Right, but you know, like he's going to be a productive member of this offense, but like I don't know if he's going to get. I don't know if I think what I think is potentially in the future here is Rodriguez get more touches as on the first, second down type of ballpark that would have normally gone to Gibson, and then Gibson kind of moves into that satellite player role kind of exclusively. So it's week one. I'm not a guy to overreact, but the fact that there's this kind of fumbling history in Gibson's past, you know, like makes me a little bit like, come on, like we got to get that cleared up.
Live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor, Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen, the Take Command pregame show with you all the way up until 4:25 today. Logan, what time does the game start?
4:25.
4:25.
Which, for some reason, I thought it was 3:25.
Yeah, I don't know. That's not a game time that NFL games start.
Not.
But I was like, I don't know. He did play in Central Time for a couple years. I was trying to give you the benefit of the doubt. I was trying to be nice.
Just me getting on the bus every day and then showing up when the game starts.
Yep.
That's how I did it.
That's that. What time's the bus? I don't know. I should tell you a bus time. Be like, this is when you need to be here. Probably give me less of a heart attack. I don't know that everyone needs to know that.
Yeah.
All right. So, Logan, ready for a fun fact for this segment?
Absolutely, yeah. What do we got?
Washington quarterback Sam Howell, who led the Commanders, of course, to a Week 1 victory in his second career start. He had 202 passing yards in that game. That's fine. But he had a passing and a rushing touchdown.
Nice.
He also had a passing and a rushing touchdown in his first career start last season against Dallas. If he gets that again today, he'll become the first player ever to record that in his first 3 career games. And did you know, or do you know, the last player to do it in his... his first 3 starts.
Robert Griffin III?
These two stats don't seem to go together. First player ever each of his first 3 career games. Oh, this is his first 3 career starts.
I see.
So that's the differentiator here. Hint, it was a Broncos quarterback.
Oh, Broncos quarterback? And it was a young player, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Shoot, I have no idea.
Rushing and passing.
I have no idea.
How about Timothy Tebow?
Oh, all right.
2010.
Timothy Tebow.
There's your fun fact of the day. I would like someone here at Tap Sports Bar to take that fact, wait for someone else in their party to show up, and then do that trivia as if it was your own.
Yeah.
So I'm giving you that here to make your friend look silly in 5 minutes when they show up here at Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. Now, Seth Walder from ESPN, who's one of their analytics guys, he had an interesting observation, take, numerical look. He noted that one of the things he was nervous about for Howell coming out of North Carolina was his sack rate, how often percentage-wise he took sacks.
Yes.
And that has obviously been an issue so far for him through the one game and through the preseason as well. When you watch the tape, though, you talk to your people around the building. How concerned are you about Howell's ability to protect himself in the pocket and operate this offense efficiently?
Yeah, I think the thing that's probably most concerning, just for me, and this is not from anybody in the building, is just how long he's holding the football. I'm sure everyone's seen that graphic that comes out every week, where it's segmented by number of sacks and then time to throw the football. And Sam is like in a quadrant all by himself from a time standpoint. Like he just holds the football, I think, even longer than fans were aware of when they were watching the game. So that's something that I think is a little concerning. Obviously, that can be mitigated or affected by play calling, which is something that you want to see, obviously. But, yeah, man, like he just got to kind of speed up his process, and that's not something that's going to happen overnight, right? That's going to take some time. It's going to take some reps. So in terms of concern, I think I don't know what you do about it. So my level of concern is like, well, he's got to grow out of it. Does he grow out of it? That might be more. That's probably a question I would say to myself. Does he ever grow out of this? And based on his college performance, based on his couple starts he's got, it doesn't look like that, but I think as he gets more comfortable and more familiar with NFL defenses and what they're trying to do, I think he will.
I think it's the kind of thing that's really important to point out because you go, okay, how does a guy with this much production and this kind of physical tools, he's good on his feet, he's tough, he seems pretty smart, he's got a phenomenal arm.
Yep.
How does that guy fall to the fifth round? Is it just because he's short? I thought we were over that. I thought Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray proved that that doesn't have to be a full deterrent hindrance level NFL trait. And this is one of those things where certainly scouts are looking at him and the way he holds the ball at North Carolina, and they're like, I don't know how that flies in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that during the draft process came up constantly. Like, PFF, they do their big board. Daniel Jeremiah talked about it pretty extensively, right? And it's something that I think a lot of fans who maybe do like kind of minor evaluations, they ignore because they look at the arm talent, they look at the physical ability, they look at the leadership qualities, whatever it may be. But that and throwing under pressure are one of the highest indicators of a successful quarterback at the NFL level. So if that's bad for him, which it was, and it still is, like that's something that needs to get cleaned up. And I do think that this offensive system that EB is utilizing, this West Coast system, will be beneficial, but it's going to take time, So that's one of the reasons why, like today, for example, like this matchup makes me very, very nervous because it's kind of like, he's got to get the football out of his hands more quickly. And again, maybe EB can call stuff, maybe they can dissect the defense in a different way because we talked about EB's familiarity with Joseph. All those things are going to be super impactful, but I am concerned about it.
Yeah, if you look at the tail of the tape through 1 week, obviously Washington scored the 20 last week. Denver gave up 17 in the loss to Vegas. They only gave up 61 rushing yards. I think Bieniemy obviously a little bit more aggressive running the football last week in the second half, or switches. I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but a little more
deliberate.
Deliberate. Yeah, that's a good word for it. Running the football last week. How do you think that he kind of splits the play calling this week? Seeing what Denver did last week, how stout they were against the run. But also, I think there's a question to be asked. Were they stout against the run, or did Jimmy Garoppolo just quick fire out of a bunch of called run plays? And that's something that he does that might not be on Sam's plate.
Dude, watching that Denver defense versus Las Vegas, they were extremely stout against the run, man. They were very, very good. Now, Las Vegas came in with this approach, like we talked about on the podcast, the Rock'em Sock'em Robots approach, where they were pretty much like, we're going to line up, we're going to run power, we're going to run counter, we're going to run these very aggressive, physical gap scheme runs. And the linebackers for Denver were just way too fast at reading runs and getting off combinations and getting into run lanes and making great tackles on a good back in Jacobs. So I think they were excellent. I think they were excellent in terms of stopping the run. And I thought Mike McDaniels, the offensive play caller there, just didn't really do a good job, in my opinion or my estimation, of putting his offense in a good position to run the football. Because like we've talked about on the podcast, Denver runs a 3-4 structure. So they got 3 big guys inside. They got 2 big edge rushers. They got 2 linebackers that are geeked up and ready to stop the run. And he just was like, we're going to run into that. And I don't think that's the best way to do it, man. If I'm trying to run the football against them, I like EB, like we talked about, get in some lighter personnel. Get in 11, get in 10. Maybe you can get in 12, and like they'll match you in the 4-down kind of nickel structures. That's where you want to live, man. You don't want to be living with a bunch of killers who are on the team to stop the run. I don't want to run into those guys. I want to run into guys who are there to cover. I want to run into coverage players. And so I think EB is very aware of that. Like when you look at what he did in Kansas City, when you look at what he did in last year's opener against Kansas City versus Arizona, we got into some different looks to help our guys look better and be more effective. So, yes, I think Denver's defense is excellent. It's a very fast and physical group, but I also think that Las Vegas was kind of being stubborn a little bit with their approach. Get out of that.
Wait, Josh McDaniels stubborn?
I don't know. Does he have that reputation?
Yeah, just to say the least. All right, we get back here on the Take Command pregame show. Kevin Sheehan will join us for his weekly visit. He always joins us a half hour into the show. Also should tell you, for those of you listening on 106.7 The Fan on the radio, on the stream, you'll stay with us. If you're watching on YouTube, no worries. But for those listening on 106.7 and The Fan on the radio, we will be leaving you about 15 minutes from now for Dodgers-Nats pregame. Charlie and Dave standing by. So that is still to come. But Sheehan next. That's Logan Paulsen. I'm Craig Hoffman, and this is the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day.
But my favorite story is, I think we were playing Cincinnati. Was it Cincinnati?
That's depends on the story, but maybe we were playing Cincinnati.
So Logan catches this touchdown.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Cincinnati. Yep.
It was Cincinnati. So we put in this play, and it was like, I think we called it Hoss Juke or something like that. I can't remember what we called it in that offense, but Logan's on a seam, right? So he's our vertical threat, taking the top off the defense.
Digging out, guys.
We're talking in the week. I don't think we ever said it in the install with those guys, but they're like, listen, Logan's not even in the progression. He's taking the top off this thing. We're trying to work this little option route down. And they bust this coverage. And I mean, he is screaming wide open.
I wasn't even supposed to be on the play. They were supposed to sub somebody else in because I thought I was too slow to run this route. Just for the context here for everybody.
So he's screaming wide open. And I'm like, Matt, throw it at his back shoulder. You might hit him in stride. If you try and back shoulder him. Threw it right at him. He catches it. It was an awesome touchdown. Yeah. Just the celebration afterwards was so much fun. For me, it was always fun celebrating the touchdowns with the guys that didn't score them all the time. Like
take that, Julio Jones.
Yeah, and I'm not. I'm saying that, but like your role for us was you did the dirty work, and when you see guys that do the dirty work get rewarded for it, that was really cool. Something I'll never forget. The caveman. Yeah. And the caveman was in there in the end zone celebrating. It was awesome.
So there was this play where we call it like it was, what is it, 19 Zorro. So basically like versus a 3-4 structure with an outside linebacker who is Von Miller in this case, I would get help from the fullback, like on inside help. So I could be really aggressive on my reach, really violent to the reach. And so it was me and DY, is a physical son of a gun. And so we take Von Miller and we put him, like, no joke, in the water cooler. Like we put him way out there on the sideline. And we were like, this guy ain't nothing. Like we're going to, we were so fired up. And so it ended up being like a 25 or 30 yard gain. So we were all fired up, and then Kyle's like, all right, let's come back to it. So like 2 plays later, we're running again, and we're running to the right. And I was like, oh man, we are about to tee this dude up real quick. Just tune him up nice and good. And so I go out to get him, and I'm firing off the ball. My hat's low. I'm flat back. And I swear to God, like he was about as close as my hand was to my face, and he just disappeared into like mist. And he like swung me, and I fell right on my face. And I just was like, oh my gosh. And like I went back and watched the film, and it was crazy how quickly he was able to like do his little basketball weave and then like just disappear from my vision and get inside and make the tackle. And I was like, oh, so now he's upset. So then the next play, I'm like all tentative and nervous. And I felt like Vaughn did. I watched this on film, so I knew he did this. But he does a really good job of like kind of like playing it like a boxer a little bit. You know what I mean? Like kind of rope-a-doping you a little bit. So like he lets you get one, right? Where I got after him. He makes you look like an idiot. And then the next time I was super tentative on him, and he literally did like a double stick like he was going to make me miss, and then just grabbed my neck and then threw me over the pile. I was like, man, this is going to be tough. I got to like think of a plan here in the next 15 minutes so I don't look like an idiot for the rest of the game. But, when you're playing elite football players like him, like there's a reason they're elite. So if you get one on them, it's probably because they want. They probably because they're letting you get one.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. It's a trap.
Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day, live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. Logan Paulsen there, Craig Hoffman here, and with us on the phone, Kevin Sheehan, host of the Kevin Sheehan Show, 10-1 on the Team 980. Mr. Sheehan, hope you're enjoying the first half hour of the early window. How are you?
What's up, boys? How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. All right, for you, what is the number one storyline for the Commanders in Denver today? Is it Chase? Is it Sam? Is it something else?
For me, I'm excited to see Chase Young, and I hope he's healthy and, gets enough snaps. I want him to have the appropriate number of snaps, whatever they think that is. But for me, it's just to see what kind of progress Sam Howell made from week 1 to week 2. He's an evolving, quarterback, and he's got to be developed. And some of the bad habits he has, he's got to get coached out of. And some of the things he does well, they've got to emphasize and highlight. I thought we saw some good, and I thought we saw some bad. But, if he is what we think he is, which is a really smart young guy who's super coachable and auto-corrects himself, as we were told, at some point during the offseason, then I'd like to see him take, a step, even if it's a small step forward. And I guess part of that would be, can't take all those sacks, can't put the ball on the ground. And, an opponent like today's opponent, they should be able to hang around and have a chance if they don't give it to them.
Yeah, one of the things that sticks out to me about this Denver defense is that they're pretty good at football, Kevin. And I do think that this will be a much different challenge than Arizona was week 1. Like, for the young quarterback going on the road, like you said, you want to see that stuff corrected. How hard do you think that's going to be for him in this kind of hostile environment against a defense that I think is pretty good?
Yeah, it's pretty good. They've got really good players. They've got an outstanding corner, and game planning around Pat Surtain and look. One of the things, and I have not heard enough of you this week, Logan, and I always love listening to you, after games, but I hope that Eric Bieniemy stays aggressive.
Yeah.
I didn't mind the pass to run ratio because I think there's a long game here with Sam Howell, and I think he wants to err on the side of being aggressive. Now, when the game got risky, I think they did the right thing against an opponent that they really couldn't lose to last week. But their best players are Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel and De'Ami Brown. And I want to see those guys touch the ball, and the easiest way for them to touch the ball is by catching it. But you're right, Denver's good on defense. They're well coached on defense. I thought it was such an interesting choice to go to Vance Joseph. He knows Mike Zimmer well, and I thought there was a really good chance it was going to be Zimmer in Denver. It's a bigger test, obviously, this week than last week, all the way around.
Kevin Sheehan with us, of course, host of the Kevin Sheehan Show here on the Take Command pregame show. So there is an alternate version of this game, Kevin, where we are talking about the Russell Wilson-led Commanders against whoever would be in Denver at this point. Like, as someone who has a great knowledge of the history of this team and kind of the way the league functions week to week and the storylines of it, like, how glad are you that we're not living in that alternate universe?
I don't know. I think we should be careful to, bury him now that he's got Sean Payton instead of Nathaniel Hackett as the head coach. I mean, this is a guy that's going to go into the Hall of Fame when his career is over, no matter what happens in Denver. And, vintage Russell Wilson off schedule was as good as anything that we saw during those years. And, yeah, they had good defenses. And, he's not great from the pocket for a lot of reasons. But I think, Sean Payton's the right kind of guy for him. He's not going to let him bring in the entourage, as he called it, Russell Wilson Inc. And, the stories that we read kind of after he was gone from Seattle, I mean, I think they were surprising to a lot of people that weren't really in the know about just what a diva he was. And we know that would have never worked here. Certainly not with the previous regime, because the last owner would have made it even worse for Wilson.
Yeah.
I mean, if Wilson was a diva with Pete Carroll and Schneider in that group in Seattle, imagine how entitled he would have been here last year. But I still would not close the book on him at all. I wouldn't. I think there's just too much off-schedule creativity. And last week, guys, I'm sure you guys know this, but each team only had the ball for 6 total possessions.
Yeah.
That's unheard of in a game. And Denver scored on 3 of them and missed a field goal on the 4th. So if you're in position to score on 2/3 of your drives, that's pretty productive offense. They missed an extra point. They missed a field goal in the game, which ended up being the difference.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, and we're probably going to talk about that later on the show. It's like he's not the same Russell Wilson from 5 years ago, but he's much better than Josh Dobbs. And I think he's still a pretty serviceable starting player. Like, it's not, the crazy splash plays and all that stuff. What does the defense have to do to contain him, in kind of his current state and iteration?
Well, I think you just have to do your best to keep him in the pocket. I think even when they run, and you watched it, I'm sure, last week, even when they go with the QB keeper or the bootleg and he's out, you've got to hem that in. You've got to make him throw short and not be able to get to that second and third level on the boot. Him outside the pocket, him off schedule is where he thrives. Him in the pocket is where he struggles. And then I would say, you've got to stop the run. If you go back, there were some creases for last week when they ran the football. They didn't get hurt by it necessarily, but Javonte Williams, to me, who is, a former teammate of Sam Howell's at Carolina, I think he's got star potential as a running back, and Perine's really thriving. So stop the run and then keep Wilson in the pocket.
Kevin Sheehan, Kevin Sheehan with us. We got about 90 seconds, as you know, here, Kevin. So wrap up with this. Who you got?
I think it's a really close game like last week. I think it's low scoring, and I think, it comes down to who, doesn't make the mistakes. I got Denver 20-16, but it's certainly a winnable game to get to 2-0.
If Washington's going to pull the upset, it will be because what?
It will be because they don't make it easy for a team that struggles to score, or maybe we think will struggle to score. They don't make it easy for them to score, and they're in a 17, 16, 17, 13 kind of game that they win. But if they give Denver the chances they gave Arizona last week, it's not going to be a good outcome today.
Got it. Kevin Sheehan with us here on the Take Command pregame show. Thank you, sir, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
All right. Kevin, of course, on 10-1 on the Team 980. He's got the Kevin Sheehan Show podcast as well. So here's what we got for the rest of the show today. Coming up next, you'll hear from Ron Rivera and Eric Bieniemy in our Coach Speaks segment. The Sports Junkies, we'll check in with them coming up at 2. We'll talk more about Sam Howell versus pressure in our Tale of the Tape at 2:15. Chris Russell will join the show at 2:30. Then check the scoreboard. Should be around halftime, and most of the 1 o'clock games are on 2:45, if not a little bit sooner. And then we will flip the field. What about this Denver offense? Talk more about it coming up at 3. I believe Grant Paulsen's going to join us at 3:30. Got to talk about the altitude too, Logan. That's going to be an interesting thing to monitor today. That all still to come. If you're listening on the Team 980, you're all set. If you are on 106.7 The Fan and want to keep with us, flip over. If not, Nats pregame now.
You can listen to the team.
Perfect.
Smart speaker.
When you look at Sam Howell's day, there's obviously some good. There's obviously some yikes. When you look at his decision-making, though, let's start there, and then we'll get into some of the protection issues. But decision-making wise and kind of how he executed the throws that he was asked to, what'd you make of his day?
Yeah, so I don't want to come off like I'm being like overly optimistic about Sam Howell's performance. Like I want to ground this in some sense of reality. Like, can he play better? Like, absolutely. But I actually thought he played pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, it was like a good first outing. I know he had the pick. I know he had the fumble. The pick, I thought, like we just watched that together, and I think that he was, you know, just a little bit later. His footwork was a little bit off. Like, it just didn't seem like the timing of the depth of the route matched up with his feet necessarily. And because he's waiting so long to throw the football, obviously the ball gets tipped and then gets picked off. And then on the sack force fumble, I don't necessarily think that's anybody's fault. I think, you know, obviously Wiley gives up the sack, but that's a great rush by Gardeck right there, number 45 for the Arizona Cardinals on the spin move. And it's a tough look. The guard and Wiley are kind of on different levels and leaves a little bit of space for the inside move. And then Sam's just trying to make a play probably when he needs to know that, like, I don't need to do that right there.
Yeah, that would be my thing on the fumble is that the fumble is bad because time score situation, like you got to be okay punting, and you just got to, it's not to your blind side. You saw it coming. Just eat the football and make sure that you get it onto the foot of Trustway there.
Yeah, and I think we both agree with that, you know, and I think that's what you get though with young players. You know, you get, like, I think that people forget, like, people want him to come out and be like this amazing football player right away, and I think he's doing a pretty good job.
Last guy to mention real quick, Antonio Gibson. How concerned are we about the fumble?
I mean, it is concerning because it just seems to be like a consistent thing with him. You know, like, I like him. I like him as a player. I think I like him as a person. He's awesome around the building and stuff. But like in any offense, like, ball security is job security. Like, that is something that is so important. And for that fumble to come in the red zone, like as you're going in to score, it is a big deal. And he's running hard. Like, he's doing everything you want. I think he makes a nice cut on that. But I think he's going to get less touches, you know, like if that continues to be an issue. And EB's always been very good, at least in my experience with him, about coming back to guys after they have an issue, you know. And, you know, Gibson catches the screen in the fourth quarter that ends up being like I think it was an 11-yard gain.
Yeah, it should have been a first down. But
right.
The referees decided that they were going to have a terrible day, so it wasn't.
Right, but, you know, like he's going to be a productive member of this offense, but, like, I don't know if he's going to get. I don't know if I think what I think is potentially in the future here is Rodriguez get more touches as on the first, second down type of ballpark that would have normally gone to Gibson, and then Gibson kind of moves into that satellite player role kind of exclusively. So it's week one. I'm not a guy to overreact, but the fact that there's this kind of fumbling history in Gibson's past, you know, like, makes me a little bit like, come on, like, we got to get that cleared up.
the Take Command pregame show. We are live at MGM National Harbor from Tap Sports Bar. Of course, we're also broadcasting live right now on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980 and @1067 The Fan. So, Logan, if people are driving around and are like, man, I really like this show, but I'm almost out of my car, good news. Just go home. Flip open your smart TV, open the YouTube app, make sure you're subscribed to the Team 980 or 1067 The Fan. In fact, might as well do both.
Yeah,
and
there
then
you go.
pick your channel and watch us there, and we'll take you all the way up to kickoff at 4:25. And it's time now for our Coach Speak segment, where we take a listen to what some of the coaches had to say during the week, and we go either take it at face value if we think they're telling the truth, or we try to translate from the Coach Speak BS-o-meter. So let's start off with Ron Rivera, and obviously he was asked quite a bit on Friday about Chase Young's status, and this is what he had to say on whether Chase was going to play. This one's not BS. Chase is going to play. Here was Rivera announcing it.
A lot of good things throughout the week, and there's a lot of confidence. Obviously we have to be smart because it is his first introduction to full contact, full speed contact, other than what he had in practice this week. And he had a very good week. I mean, the young man has worked his tail off, and I think he's done the things that they've needed to see. So that's the real big positive for us going forward.
So obviously, Ron being very complimentary of Chase. I think Ron is at this point very much aware of the narrative around him and the things he said about Chase, even if they weren't meant to be, to put pressure on or whatever. But I'll ask you this question: he has not had full contact practices since he got hurt, which was early in training camp. He has been working as much as he can without that. So there are different levels of conditioning there. If you're him, how are you feeling about your readiness going into this game?
I'm a little bit of an outlier in this regard, so that's totally fine. Just want to acknowledge that real quick. Like, one of the things about me is I always felt like I needed some contacts. You know what I mean? Some physical contacts, feel the blocks, feel the real speed, 1-versus-1s. But there's a lot of guys that I played with who didn't need that, who didn't feel like they needed that. Like London Fletcher, for example, was a guy who was dogmatic about practicing, but near the end of his career, he just physically couldn't do it every day, and he could get by with that, And there were other guys that I played with similar, very, very similar situations. So, with Chase, if I was in Chase's shoes, I'd probably be feeling a little bit nervous. Do I have it? Am I in the right space? Am I conditioned well enough? But again, like I said, I'm a little bit unique in that regard. Let's just say that.
Obviously, plenty of other questions around the team beyond just Chase, even if he gets a lot of the headlines with his status as a former number 2 pick, the star power, all of that kind of stuff. And we talked a little bit earlier about the familiar faces in these two coaching staffs specifically, where you have Ron Rivera facing Sean Payton, as they did for years in Carolina and New Orleans. But you also have Eric Bieniemy and Vance Joseph, who we spent some time on earlier. EB actually asked about that this week, and here's what Bieniemy said about a guy who's actually a close friend, even if he has routinely beaten the living tar out of him as a coach.
You know what? Now, I may be a little biased because I've thought the world of VJ since he was a freshman when he played for us. He went to a high school that put out a number of players out of New Orleans, Louisiana. He went to Shaw High School. And hell, I think they won state when he was there. And so he's always had that character. He's always had that leadership quality about him. He played quarterback. He was a backup that whole entire time. But he was one of the smartest players on our team as a freshman. And obviously, it led to him playing a few years in the NFL. But on top of that, when I was thinking about getting to coaching, he was already involved in coaching. And he kind of inspired me. And so, VJ is a well-versed individual who's accomplished a lot. And the thing that I love about him, first and foremost, he has not changed. Second of all, he continues to grow in this industry. And third of all, he has a way about himself that keeps himself around, because when jobs are coming available, he's always one name that's always discussed.
So not just old friends, but old college teammates at Colorado. By the way, what a time to be a Colorado Buffalo right now. But old friends, old teammates, and now opponents on opposite sidelines calling the game against each other today.
Yeah, and I think, he didn't say anything there that was good or, nothing about the game, right? And I think that's how you handle it. You just kind of say, he's a friend. I think he's a smart guy, and in the back of your mind, it's like when you're playing, I don't know, like video games versus somebody, and you got him. It's like, oh yeah, he does a good job, but like I know on game day I'm gonna get after him, and that's like kind of the vibe I got from that conversation. And EB does a great job of being hyper complimentary, and I think that's very professional. That's the right way to handle it. There's nothing there that kind of gives you any insight or anything on that, but I do think that I expect him to have a very good coaching performance today if I was going to put money on it.
Did you have any guys that you either liked or hated playing against because you had personal relationships with them?
I always had a good, when I was in Atlanta, we played against Washington, and Ryan was out there, and Ryan
Kerrigan, in case anyone can't put 1 and 1 together.
Yeah, Ryan Kerrigan. It was really good to go against him and kind of fun. And I was at a point in my career where physically I wasn't quite where I was, and he was still doing a pretty good job. And so I was like, man, it was a good barometer to say, man, you're much closer to the end than you ever thought possible before. But it was really good to be out there and playing with him and see him after the game and talk and all that kind of stuff. And I got the utmost respect for Ryan, so it's always fun going against him whenever that opportunity presented itself.
Do you recognize him when you walk past him in the building, or it's just you're like, who's that skinny guy?
He is much thinner than I ever thought he would be, but he's kind of in a bulk phase now. He's getting a little,
he's getting a little bit back.
Yeah, a little bit back. No,
okay.
nothing crazy. I think it's all appropriate. I think he probably weighs about 220 pounds, 225 pounds, but he was getting very thin there for a while, very happy being lighter, and now he's
not having to carry NFL defensive end weight.
Yeah, now he's getting back into it a little bit. So, but yeah, it's good seeing him around the building for sure. He's one of my best favorite guys that I ever played with in my whole career. So
yeah, so you got that matchup today.
Yep.
One bite that we did want to play from a coach. We don't play Jack Del Rio bites often because he's often pretty. Jack is, I think, the best one at being short and not giving you anything.
Is the master of coach speak.
Yeah, just doesn't want to say much at all. But he said a little bit here. He's also honest, though. I will give Jack that.
Yeah, he's very honest.
The times that he gets talked about is because he's honest and he says something interesting about a guy that's, obviously it's not typically that interesting when a guy's playing great and a coach is like, hey, he's playing great. But he will say, that guy's got to step up a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's something the player already knows. And this week that player is Cody Barton. Del Rio on Barton at his Thursday press conference.
Can't wait to hear this.
I think, you'll see us utilize packages, personnel groupings, week to week. So I wouldn't make too big a deal over one or the other. Got an earlier question on Emmanuel, and now there's one on Jamin. It's kind of the same type of thing. I mean, we're going to roll our guys. We're going to have a plan. We're going to attack the people we're going up against, and we'll review that, enjoy the victories, make our corrections either way, and move on to next. And that's where we are right now, just kind of getting ready for the Broncos and putting a new plan together. And whatever ratios you saw last week may not apply this week.
So the question specifically was about, hey, Jamin, Cody, one seems to be playing a little better than the other, and you guys played the guys not playing well more. I think he does. He may be saying a lot there. He might not. I think this is why the coach speak translator is important, Logan.
Yeah.
I think what he's really saying is, all options are on the table.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing there from Jack. Knowing Jack, talking to Jack, that was about as high level as he possibly could have got. He's like, we got multiple personnel packages. We'll do some different stuff.
Who could know?
Who knows what's going to happen? It's Monday. We're going to figure out what we want to do. So not a lot going on there. But I do think to his point, if you want some insider baseball, they do have multiple defensive personnels that they trot out there every single day. And I think every week it's going to look a little bit different. So, for example, Jamin doesn't start necessarily in the Cinco package. He never has since he's been here. Only when he had their green dot end of last year. So that's Cody and Cam usually, right, with the extra defensive linemen. So obviously, that's one. Then now there's this 3 safety package that they've got with Percy. And then they've got the one with St. Juice starting outside. Then they got one where St. Juice is the nickel as opposed to Cam. So they do have a lot, to his point, a lot of different things that are for sure dictated by the opponent. For example, if you're playing Kansas City, you better believe it's going to be Forbes, St. Juice, and Fuller out there for 90% of the snaps. You know what I'm saying? Because they're going to throw the ball a lot. However, this week or last week against Arizona, a little bit different dynamic. And I think this week's approach by the defense will look very similar to Arizona, quite honestly, because of their philosophy. They want to run the ball. They want to pound the football a little bit. They want to be play action heavy. So can you get Cam Curl on the field in those running situations? Because he does have a good feel for run pass. He's got great instincts. So I think it'll feel very similar. So, again, not a lot there from Jack in terms of his view of Cody, his view of Jamin specifically in that relationship. But I do think it's important to acknowledge they do have a lot of diversity in terms of what they present to an opposing defense from a personnel standpoint every single week.
No question. Here's the part that goes unsaid, and I don't even know if you said this in there, is in those packages, you can switch the players out.
That's true.
And that's the part that I think is going to be worth watching is,
I agree.
Hey, we like this package because of the type of player it puts on the field. 1 linebacker, 5 defensive linemen, for instance, in the Cinco package, and whatever group of DBs we want to put with that. But you can make that 1 linebacker Jamin Davis instead of Cody Barton.
I agree.
They haven't yet, but that is, to me, what has to be watched moving forward because Jamin, again, we talked about this ad nauseum on the podcast this week, so if you want the long version, check us out there. But you drafted Jamin in the first round. There's no reason why you shouldn't be wanting to play him more. And right now, he's the better player.
1,000%. And that's the thing. And again, it's 1 week. It's 1
Right.
week. But it's also preseason. It's also training camp. It's also the entire offseason that Jamin was participating in. He's been better. And so it is a little confounding, a little confusing as to why you wouldn't. You wouldn't want him involved. So,
but it is 1 game week, so who knows? Maybe
yes.
Cody's better, and they know what they wanted to scout.
100%. So it'll be really, again, one of those things that as the season goes will be really compelling to keep an eye on. Same thing with like Cam and his role and how they're using him in terms of him being a run player quite a bit. So lots of things that I'm really excited to watch from that standpoint this week.
All right, we are getting a little closer to halftime of the early games, about somewhere between 8 and 10 minutes left in the second quarter of most of these. The Ravens just went up 10-7 on a long Justin Tucker field goal. Chargers just went up. Oh, we got a big guy touchdown in Tennessee. So
nice.
we got who's that? Pipkins just caught a touchdown on a tackle eligible play against Mike Vrabel, who knows a little something about an unusual player being eligible. So they are up double digits now on the Titans, are the Chargers. Atlanta trails Green Bay 7-3. Desmond Ridder, at least 1 bad interception in that game. So we'll get you a more extensive scoreboard as we get towards halftime of these games. But next, the Sports Junkies. Let's check in with the boys here on a burgundy and gold game day.
But my favorite story is, I think we were playing Cincinnati. Was it Cincinnati?
That's not depends on the story, but maybe we were playing Cincinnati.
So Logan catches this touchdown.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Cincinnati. Yep.
It was Cincinnati. So we put in this play, and it was like, I think we called it Hoss Juke or something like that. I can't remember what we called it in that offense, but Logan's on a seam, right? So he's our vertical threat, taking the top off the defense.
Digging out, guys.
We're talking in the week. I don't think we ever said it in the install with those guys, but they're like, listen, Logan's not even in the progression. He's taking the top off this thing. We're trying to work this little option route down. And they bust this coverage. And I mean, he is screaming wide open.
I wasn't even supposed to be on the play. They were supposed to sub somebody else in because I thought I was too slow to run this route. Just for the context here for everybody.
So he's screaming wide open. And I'm like, Matt, throw it at his back shoulder. You might hit him in stride. If you try and back shoulder him. Threw it right at him. He catches it. It was an awesome touchdown. Just the celebration afterwards was so much fun. For me, it was always fun celebrating the touchdowns with the guys that didn't score them all the time.
Take that, Julio Jones.
Yeah, and I'm not. I'm saying that, but your role for us was you did the dirty work, and when you see guys that do the dirty work get rewarded for it, that was really cool. Something I'll never forget. The caveman.
Yeah.
And the caveman was in there in the end zone celebrating. It was awesome.
So there was this play where we call it it was, 19 Zorro. So basically versus a 3-4 structure with an outside linebacker who is Von Miller in this case, I would get help from the fullback, on inside help. So I could be really aggressive on my reach, really violent to the reach. And so it was me and DY, is a physical son of a gun. And so we take Von Miller and we put him, no joke, in the water cooler. We put him way out there on the sideline. And we were this guy ain't nothing. We're going to, we were so fired up. And so it ended up being like a 25 or 30-yard gain. So we were all fired up, and then Kyle's like, all right, let's come back to it. So like 2 plays later, we're running again, and we're running to the right. And I was like, oh, man, we are about to tee this dude up real quick. Just tune him up nice and good. And so I go out to get him, and I'm firing off the ball. My hat's low. I'm flat back. And I swear to God, like he was about as close as my hand was to my face, and he just disappeared into like mist. And he like swung me, and I fell right on my face. And I just was like, oh my gosh. And like I went back and watched the film, and it was crazy how quickly he was able to like do his little basketball weave and then like just disappear from my vision and get inside and make the tackle. And I was like, oh, so now he's upset. So then the next play, I'm like all tentative and nervous. And I felt like Vaughn did. I watched this on film, so I knew he did this, but he does a really good job of like kind of like playing it like a boxer a little bit. You know what I mean? Like kind of rope-a-doping you a little bit. So like he lets you get one, right? Where I got after him. He makes you look like an idiot. And then the next time I was super tentative on him, and he literally did like a double stick like he was going to make me miss, and then just grabbed my neck and then threw me over the pile. I was like, man, this is going to be tough. I got to like think of a plan here in the next 15 minutes so I don't look like an idiot for the rest of the game. But, when you're playing elite football players like him, like there's a reason they're elite. So if you get one on them, it's probably because they want. They probably because they're letting you get one.
It's a trap. It's a trap.
It's a trap.
It is the Take Command pregame show, broadcasting live from MGM National Harbor, hour number 2 from the Tap Sports Bar. Come hang out with us. Come say what's up. Just, do it in a commercial break. It's always a goofy bit when people try to say hi when we're on the air. It's like, hey, I'm so glad you're here. But we are doing a radio show. Something you can see, by the way, on YouTube at the Team 980 and at 106.7 The Fan in about 90 minutes after the game tonight, Logan Paulsen there, as I'm Craig Hoffman here. We will be back on these same YouTube streams for the Take Command post-game show, which we are very much looking forward to. Hopefully a victory to talk about. Of course, tomorrow morning on the Sports Junkies, they will be talking about the same thing, hopefully a victory on a Victory Monday. But each week on this here pregame show, we do check in with the guys. So JP and company, take it away.
All right, boys, the Commanders have a chance to go 2-0. They head out to Denver on the road to take on a Broncos team that lost in a squeaker. What's your initial lean, Jason Bishop?
My initial lean is, even though Denver isn't a scary offensive team, and Russell Wilson certainly isn't the quarterback that he was 5 years ago, they still pose a threat because they're a well-coached team. It's a road game. It's in Denver. It's Sam Howell's first road game as a starter. I just think it's going to be a challenge, and I just don't believe this team yet can play mistake-free, and I think Denver will be a challenge. I think Denver wins a close game.
Yeah, I thought we saw some good things from Sam Howell, certainly. Touchdown pass.
Yeah.
Really nice
It wasn't
play,
horrible.
and he ran one in, but of course he did have the turnovers, took a bunch of sacks, and now you go on the road, and look, it may not be the crowd that Denver had when Peyton Manning was there, but it's still its home field advantage. What's your vibe, Cakes?
I just want to see how Sam Howell handles his first start in hostile territory. And Jason mentioned better coaching. They weren't that much better coached in week 1 because they committed 10 penalties for almost 100 yards. So I'm sure that'll get cleaned up in weeks 2 and beyond. Overall, is Sean Payton a better coach than Ron Rivera? I think there's no doubt about that. But I think this is going to be a pretty tightly contested affair. I don't see a lot of offense in this game from either team. I think it's going to hover right around the total of 39, but you'd just like to see some of the mistakes that jumped out at you, the 6 sacks, Sam Howell coughing up the ball and letting the Cardinals jump on it in the end zone. That can't happen on the road if you want to win a game and get to 2-0.
I think it would have been a disaster if we had won week 1 pretty handily. So
Why would that be a disaster?
I just think it'd be a
Just
little
for the
too much confidence.
expectations?
Yeah, because this is a week-to-week league. We know it. I mean, we're going to come in here and we're going to go, can you believe so-and-so won? Can you believe so-and-so lost? Can you believe so-and-so? Right? It's a week-to-week league. You're never as good as you think you are. You're never as bad as you think you are. And I think it was a great wake-up call to play a scrappy Cardinals team that everybody thinks you're just going to smoke and basically steal a W. But I think they're going to go to Denver. They got a big chip on their shoulder. I think Sam Howell has a chance to make history here. Have 3 straight games. His first 3 games in NFL where he'll have a touchdown rushing and a touchdown passing. I think he's got a real shot at setting that record. I like the Skins 27-17.
With Sam Howell taking all the sacks and the turnovers, I wonder if there's going to be a growing book for defensive coordinators at just attacking the hell out of the quarterback and blitzing left and right. Now, the Broncos don't have great personnel. Like, they don't have great edge rushers. If you look at them statistically, they don't have anybody that's scary, but neither did the Cardinals. And they found a way to get to the quarterback. So, I mean, all eyes on Sam Howell and that offensive line.
One of their better pass rushers, Frank Clark, is out for at least a few weeks. I believe he's dealing with a hip injury, so he's something that you don't have to deal with.
How many sacks did they have last week?
Zero.
They had exactly 0.
They barely hit Jimmy G.
Right.
Exactly.
But it was Jimmy G, and it was a tight game. And look, Sam Howell may ultimately be the franchise quarterback of this franchise. He's not at that level of experience like Jimmy G. I like the Broncos to win in a close game, 23-20.
I like the Broncos 20-17. Will Lutz kicks a field goal to win it. But if what?
You got about 30 seconds.
All right, considering you've got the Bills and the Giants coming up, kind of get a pass. You're not really forced to win one of those games.
Commanders fans hate the fact that I am on the Commanders this week. I have them winning 24-17. That's a dub, and that's also an over for all the people who love the over-unders. I am one of those people.
I'm also in 27-17.
27-17. So it's a split. Shocker, the Junkies are split. This is a huge game in Denver. Back to you, boys.
All right, thank you, JP. The Sports Junkies, we check in at the top of the second hour of our show each and every week here on the Take Command pregame show. Earlier, before they got to their picks, of course, we'll make our picks before we head out today, slightly before 4:25 and kickoff. But they talked about some of the mistakes last week and Sam Howell and others' ability to clean them up. We'll talk about Howell versus pressure and where some of the sacks came in the next segment when we do tail of the tape.
Sure.
But the biggest one perhaps was Antonio Gibson's fumble.
Yeah.
Red zone fumble, the worst place you can – I mean, I guess the worst place would be where Howell did it, in your own red zone, if you will.
For a touchdown.
When you get a little scoop and score the other way. But when you've got an opportunity to put points on the board and you instead give the ball away, real bad, especially for a running back who's got a bit of a fumbling history. Do you think that affects the rotation and how Randy Jordan and Eric Bieniemy deploy their backs moving forward starting this week in Denver?
I mean, I hope not. I really want Gibson to kind of be a bigger feature of this offense. I think even on the screen pass that he caught late in the game there, you see the explosiveness, you see the dexterity. I want that player getting more touches in that capacity in this offense, And, so I hope not. I hope it doesn't affect it, but I think you look at B-Rob, he's been very consistent holding on the football. Chris Rodriguez, I thought, had a very nice outing in terms of his first game, getting 3 rushes. They weren't like big, bolsterous carries. But
one of them is a fullback dive.
Yeah,
so.
Short yardage situations and things like that. But those guys are going to be really consistent. They run hard. And so I could see them just being like, hey, man, the juice ain't worth the squeeze. The risk isn't worth the reward with Gibson, and which would be very disappointing because he's a guy that does well in space. I want to see him get the ball in space more. We've been calling for that for 4 years now. And so, so do I ultimately think it's going to affect it? Probably a little bit. And I hope he can earn that trust back with EB and Coach Jordan and make sure that he's getting those touches that he needs to get.
So there's, I would say, what is an oversimplified narrative that is put out by fans on Twitter, et cetera, people who are angry and typing things on their keyboards, which makes sense on a very baseline level, but there's layers of complexity to this. So I'd like to unpack the idea here is basically what I'm getting to, which is quit running Antonio between the tackles.
Right.
Like, hey, I know how to solve the problem. Quit putting him in all these big bodies that can punch at the football. Get him out in space where he is at his best. I think the problem becomes predictability. So how do you balance getting him in space and keeping him potentially away from some of the areas where he's had the fumble issues, more inside?
Sure.
And also not making it a giant red flag that every time AG's in the game, we're going to throw him a screen or try something goofy to get him in space.
I think one of the things you look at is just look at what Dallas did for such a long time with Pollard and Zeke. Zeke is a guy that was pretty consistent in between the tackles, and Pollard was a guy that they really did a good job of getting game plan touches to. Here's a screen, here's a jet sweep, here's a duo bounce where they're pulling guys to the perimeter and he's bouncing the football. So I do think there is an element of that, but you also, like to your point, you got to make sure that he's doing the normal stuff as well, because that stuff doesn't work if they don't occasionally sprinkle in some other stuff, a pass protection, an inside run like we're talking about. So as much as it is like, let's get him the ball where he's most effective, like you got to be able to do some of the other stuff to make sure. It's like, for example, in my career, I was blocking like 90% of the time, but I had to catch the ball when they threw it to me, or else the blocking stuff just got way, way harder for the entire team. So I look at that and I think it's probably a similar situation. I think they understand what they have. I think they understand who they have and how best to maximize them. I don't think there's any discrepancy there. But I look at it and I say to myself, like, what's that balance? And I think that's what they're working through now.
Right, and I think that's the key is as long as you can do it just enough that it's not an automatic.
Yes.
Where it's like, okay, yeah, if you're going to vacate the entire middle of the field, the second AG's back there in the gun, like, Sam's got to check. We're just going to run inside zone here, and there's going to be no one home.
Sure.
And sure, we'll take the 8 yards. And hey, man, please, for the love of whatever deity you pray to, hold on to the football.
Yeah.
So there can be some of that stuff. Or like you said, a pass pro. Like, we're scared about all this space stuff. Nope, we just got an extra blocker in here.
Yeah.
Get the ball down the field to someone else. Speaking of getting the ball down the field to someone else, Terry McLaurin is one person that we have not talked about yet.
Sure.
In part because he didn't have a big role last week. EB was asked about that. We'll get you that bite later in the show and how they can unlock 17 a little bit. But next, the narrative coming out of last week's game was offensive line really bad. Reality, not so much.
Right.
We'll explain the discrepancy next. It is the Take Command pregame show live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor on the Team 980's Burgundy and Gold Game Day and streaming live on YouTube. When you look at Sam Howell's day, there's obviously some good. There's obviously some yikes. When you look at his decision-making, though, let's start there, and then we'll get into some of the protection issues. But decision-making wise and kind of how he executed the throws that he was asked to, what'd you make of his day?
Yeah, so I don't want to come off like I'm being like overly optimistic about Sam Howell's performance. Like I want to ground this in some sense of reality. Like, can he play better? Like, absolutely. But I actually thought he played pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, it was like a good first outing. I know he had the pick. I know he had the fumble. The pick, I thought, like, we just watched that together, and I think that he was, just a little bit late, or his footwork was a little bit off. Like, it just didn't seem like the timing of the depth of the route.
Look at Sam Howell's day, there's obviously some good. There's obviously some yikes. When you look at his decision-making, though, let's start there, and then we'll get into some of the protection issues. But decision-making wise and kind of how he executed the throws that he was asked to, what'd you make of his day?
Yeah, so I don't want to come off like I'm being like overly optimistic about Sam Howell's performance. Like I want to ground this in some sense of reality. Like, can he play better? Like, absolutely. But I actually thought he played pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, it was like a good first outing. I know he had the pick. I know he had the fumble. The pick, I thought, like, we just watched that together, and I think that he was, just a little bit late, or his footwork was a little bit off. Like, it just didn't seem like the timing of the depth of the route matched up with his feet necessarily. And because he's waiting so long to throw the football, obviously the ball gets tipped and then gets picked off. And then on the sack force fumble, I don't necessarily think that's anybody's fault. I think, obviously Wiley gives up the sack, but that's a great rush by Gardak right there at number 45 for the Arizona Cardinals on the spin move, and it's a tough look. The guard and Wiley are kind of on different levels and leaves a little bit of space for the inside move. And Sam's just trying to make a play probably when he needs to know that, like, I don't need to do that right there.
Yeah, that would be my thing on the fumble, is that the fumble is bad because time score situation. Like you got to be okay punting, and you just got to. It's not to your blind side. You saw it coming. Just eat the football and make sure that you get it onto the foot of Tressway there.
Yeah, and I think we both agree with that. And I think that's what you get though with young players. You get I think that people forget. People want him to come out and be like this amazing football player right away, and I think he's doing a pretty good job.
Last guy to mention real quick, Antonio Gibson. How concerned are we about the fumble?
I mean, it is concerning because it just seems to be like a consistent thing with him. I like him. I like him as a player. I think I like him as a person. He's awesome around the building and stuff. But in any offense, ball security is job security. That is something that is so important. And for that fumble to come in the red zone, as you're going in to score, it is a big deal. And he's running hard. He's doing everything you want. I think he makes a nice cut on that. But I think he's going to get less touches, if that continues to be an issue. And EB's always been very good, at least in my experience with him, about coming back to guys after they have an issue, And, Gibson catches the screen in the fourth quarter that ends up being I think it was an 11-yard gain.
Yeah, it should have been a first down.
Right.
The referees decided that they were going to have a terrible day, so it wasn't.
Right. But, he's going to be a productive member of this offense, but, I don't know if he's going to get – I don't know if I think what I think is potentially in the future here is Rodriguez get more touches as on the first, second down type of ballpark that would have normally gone to Gibson, and then Gibson kind of moves into that satellite player role kind of exclusively. So it's week one. I'm not a guy to overreact, but the fact that there's this kind of fumbling history in Gibson's past, makes me a little bit come on, we got to get that cleared up.
It is the Take Command pregame show live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. And don't forget, 90 minutes after the Commanders Broncos game tonight on YouTube, where we are also streaming right now at the Team 980 and at 106.7 The Fan. You can watch the Take Command postgame show, which will be out in podcast form in your podcast feeds first thing tomorrow morning. Also, I'll, of course, be talking about it 4 to 7 tomorrow on the radio, the Hoffman Show, weekdays on the Team 980. Just had someone come up, Logan, say hello.
Yeah.
Say they listen to the show every day.
That's
so
awesome.
Salute to you, sir. Thank you for doing that. Made me feel like I'm not talking to just Anthony every day. not that talking to Anthony's a bad deal.
Anthony's a good dude.
He said he might come by. So,
Anthony?
Yeah.
It'd be great to see him.
He had flag football games this morning not too far away.
That he's participating?
Yeah, he plays.
Is he good?
He's apparently pretty good.
Is that from him? Have you seen him play? Or?
No, I've seen some highlights. He's pretty athletic.
Highlights? What are they recording these games?
Yeah, look, man, I just host the show. I don't make the rules. It is what it is.
All right, that's fair enough.
I can find your highlights on the internet, but it's because you played in the NFL.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah,
different vibe.
You were on television. Anthony's games are not on television. All right. So when people watched on television last week, Commanders and Broncos, they often were very angry at the Commanders' offensive line.
Commanders and Broncos?
Commanders and Cardinals last week.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's the game that's happening this week.
Good. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Yep. That was. We did not time travel. Cardinals rush got home a couple of times. One in particular was very bad because Sam Howell fumbled and the ball was picked up for a Cardinals touchdown. So when you watch the tape, though, the tale of the tape is that the offensive line is not necessarily to blame, certainly for all of them, if not most of the pressures given up last week.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would say. And I'd say, there was a lot of pressures. And when you look at some of these graphics about Sam Howell holding the football, he's close to being number one in terms of longest time to throw. And again, that's not a knock on him, but usually that means you're going to get more pressures. You're going to get more sacks, all those things. With like PFF, they do a great job with all their analytics work. Sacks are a quarterback-driven statistic. So if you look at like Kirk Cousins, for example, Kirk Cousins, Robert Griffin. So this is a great analogy for this.
No one will get mad at you for bringing this back up.
Yeah. So obviously the team was on a skid of 4 games in a row with giving up 5 sacks. Nothing changed about the offensive line, just the quarterback changed. And Kirk made it a priority to get the ball out of his hand quick, and we gave up 0 sacks for the rest of the season. So I look at that and I say to myself, like, that's kind of what you're looking at here, just in terms of relationship to the offensive line. That's not an indictment of Kirk. That's not an indictment of Robert. That's just facts, like how the quarterback can impact that statistic. So when you look at the sacks specifically, I think you say, like, I don't want to say most of them, but a lot of them were on Sam. One was a mental mistake on an RPO. He should have just thrown it. He's trying to run it. That counts as a sack. Obviously, the one that they give up for the sack force fumble, maybe holding the ball a little bit long, but and Wiley.
To me, that sack is on Wiley.
Yeah.
The fumble and not eating it and being more aware of the situation and the ball security.
Yes.
That's on Sam. So it's a bad mistake by the O-line, or a not good rep for the O-line, made catastrophic by the quarterback.
And I think people kept asking me, like, why did you think the O-line plays so well? And it's like, when you just watch the All-22, when you go back and watch the pockets, like, there is a space and a control that all of the players, all of the offensive linemen have for a very long portion of the down. And to me, that is a good pocket. So when Sam can pat one more time, and then ball comes out, that's an excellent pocket. Now, there was one where Sadiq got tripped. He ends up falling down. That's a sack. Nick Gates has a mental mistake on a slide. That's a sack. For sure, those are on the offensive line. But I'd say the other ones, the majority of those, reside kind of wholly with Sam. And again, it's not like Sam had a bad game. Like, don't get it twisted. I thought Sam played very well. Did a lot of good things. But this is one of the things that the team's going to have to grow with and kind of push through with a young quarterback who likes to hold the football for a little bit.
So that leads to, I would say, a pretty important follow-up question, which is, you say it's on Sam, which would imply that there were places to throw. So how did Dotson, Samuel, McLaurin, Logan Thomas, Cole Turner, and the weapons do of making themselves available? Because a lot of times when you talk about a quarterback holding the football, it's because you want to push the ball down the field.
Yeah.
Obviously, that involves the receivers getting open, and you think there would be some attempts, but that actually didn't happen at all last week. What's even crazier to me about giving up 6 sacks is they gave up 6 sacks in a game where there were 0 20-plus air yard attempts. So the ball traveling in the air, there was 1 in the game. It doesn't go down as an official attempt because it was the PI to Terry, which, by the way, he should get credit for receiving yards on that.
Sure, 100%.
They moved the ball down the field. It's because Terry did Terry stuff, and the defense illegally stopped it.
Sure.
That's besides the point. There was, in fairness, a 19 yards through the air pass from Howell to Curtis on the high cross.
Okay.
So there's 2 kind of longer developing air yards down the field plays. But so that brings in kind of 2 questions. One, how did the receivers play? And is that any kind of area of concern that we just write off and think, these guys are great, when actually perhaps it's an area of concern? And 2, what does that mean about the play calling? And are they calling things that are longer developing, or is it purely back to Sam needs to get the ball out of his hands?
I thought there was a quick game, I remember. This happened twice. They're running like what I would call a spot concept. So a spot concept is when the outside receiver, so usually you do it out of a 3-by-1. The one receiver side is running basically a 5-yard sit route.
So he just runs out in front of the quarterback about 5 yards and turns around and is like, please throw me the football.
And usually because he's the receiver, he ends up kind of in the alley, which would be between the hash and the numbers approximately, right? So, kind of running that inside sit. And then the back will run like a flare and then run into a rail, kind of like a flat up to a rail.
Yeah, so he runs out sideways and then runs up the sideline if he runs out of sideways space.
100%. And there was one where
That's the best layman's terms I've ever done on the show.
And so there's one where Sam is looking to throw to Logan Thomas. And Logan kind of comes and kind of sits in the void. It's a little bit muddy, and the ball should probably go right to the back. Like, hey, not there, don't love it, ball to the back. He sits on Logan, and Logan kind of reading his eyes just goes to the next one. Goes to the next space after the linebackers undercut it. And then Sam pats it and then throws another ball. You know what I'm saying? He throws the ball to Logan. So that play, which is a quick game, and the ball should be out on timing and rhythm, Sam is kind of holding the football a little bit longer than he needs to. And he did that a couple times. Not like it wasn't, every single time he dropped back, but I'd say of his dropbacks, he probably did it 5 times, where it's like this is another example. Logan Thomas is running a snag route. The second receiver next to him is running a dig, a 12-yard basic. Sam is trying to force the basic, because that's where the bigger throw is. Logan is standing wide open with no one around him, and Sam is padding, trying to get the ball to dig, and then he comes back to the snag. If I'm him, if I'm the coach, I'm just saying, hey, man, the snag's there. It's probably an 8-yard gain. Logan catches, there's no one around him. He'll work up, and we're in 2nd and 2. But there needs to be a maturity and a growth there to kind of say, hey, I need to take these throws that are there for me. Then there's the one to Jahan that ends up being picked. Like Jahan, Sam hits the top of his drop. Foot comes down, and it's like 1,000, 2,000, and Sam's still waiting for Jahan. And that, to me, is again, a lack of maturity, because you should know after the first hitch, I need to get to the back. And the back's wide open over the ball for an easy completion. So
right.
Those plays are kind of littered throughout the game, and Sam did not play poorly. I don't think. I actually think he played well. But this is something that is going to need to improve to help the offensive line and to help the offense.
So I think the large takeaway here is Howell has got to learn that positive yards now is better than waiting for a bigger play potentially later. On average, you're going to wind up doing better taking the short one that's available now, on time, on target, your guy might have space to run, versus hoping that something slightly better is going to become available if you just wait. And sometimes that means you're going to miss a deep shot. You miss De'Ami Brown because you come off him too fast.
Right,
and then
that's a great
everyone's
example.
like, oh, man, how come you missed the deep stuff? We used to do that with Cousins all the time. But they moved the ball, and by the end of the year, dude had 4,000 yards passing.
Yeah.
So, I think it's really important to realize that. And if you play a lot of Madden, you learn this real quick as you throw a bunch of interceptions deep, and it's like, oh, if I just hit the back all the time, then we just move the ball down the field. Do you eventually need explosive plays to score in the NFL? Absolutely. But knowing when and how to get them versus just when to take what's there that's kind of the key to quarterbacking.
Yeah, but I'm really glad you brought up that one where he misses, was it De'Ami on the rail? Because he's letting his rhythm dictate the concept. So he gets the top of the drop, right? Hitch, he doesn't love it. Second hitch, ball's out to Jahan, right? The rhythm of the play led to an explosive opportunity, right? Yeah. So trusting the rhythm of your feet and the timing of your feet to get the ball out in that timing is kind of what we're talking about. And that's something that takes feel, it takes time. But that play to me is a great play because he's trusting the rhythm of his feet. And
he only misses De'Ami because the defense absolutely blows the coverage in a way that they never should.
Yes.
So trusting that pro defenses, if you're relying on pro defenses blowing coverage for your big plays, that's not going to work. You're going to have to make sure that the right concept is called at the right time, and then it's open in the rhythm, and it's like, okay, that's our explosive. So that one where, yes, he misses De'Ami.
Yeah.
A more veteran quarterback maybe hits that, but for right now, that's an A play for Sam because he does get a nice chunk even if he misses a potential bigger one.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes, then I think it'd be interesting to ask him, if that play impacted his throw to Jahan later in the game.
Maybe.
Where he's like, oh, I could wait, I got to hit this big throw. It's like, no, man, just trust the rhythm of it. It's okay if you miss some of these big kind of down-the-field passes. Be on time, be on rhythm. Let's keep the offense on schedule is more important than the occasional big play. And I think that's something, again, he's going to have to learn. He's going to get better at. But I think, we've talked about a ton, it comes with reps. It comes with time. It'd be really interesting to see how he handles that versus Denver this week.
No doubt. All right, you got less than a minute left in 3 or 4 of the early window games, halftime in the rest of them. We'll get you a full scoreboard update as they get going in the second half, coming up at 2:45. Right now, though, or I should say next, we'll be joined by Chris Russell. Of course, the Chris Russell Show, Russell on the radio, 1 to 4. Every weekday on the Team 980. The Rooster Cock-a-doodle-doo's in next. That's Logan. I'm Craig. This is the Take Command pregame show live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. It's Eric. For Parker Gabriel, the Broncos beat reporter for the Denver Post. What's Eric Bieniemy's history against the Broncos? How have the Chiefs performed? Division rivalries are always wacky. You see them twice a year, but there's obviously familiarity with EB going back to the days when Vance Joseph was there the first time around in Denver. So what's kind of the success rate for Bieniemy versus Joseph over the years?
Yeah, well, it's pretty good. I don't think that's all Vance's fault necessarily.
Yeah, there was that Mahomes fellow, which tends to help.
Yeah. the Broncos have not yet beat Patrick Mahomes. So the Chiefs have won 15 straight in that series. So that goes back. That series goes that winning streak goes back even before Vance Joseph was the Broncos head coach or Eric Bieniemy was in Kansas City. So certainly he's had the upper hand. They're close friends. They know each other really well. Vance spoke with reporters here today. Said someone as he was walking to the podium said, I bet Eric Bieniemy's had you on the mind all week. And Vance laughed and he said, yeah, well, he better. And so it's just all in good fun. They're friends. They've known each other forever. But as it pertains to Eric Bieniemy, teams versus Vance Joseph teams, yeah, that's been all Kansas City, just like the rivalry in general.
Let's not get it twisted. Maybe this is the most important thing. This is a very good defense. Like, this is a very fast defense. It's a very physical defense. It is a very different challenge and perspective than it was last week. So really curious to see what the plan is. And I do think that their defense's relationship, Denver's defense's relationship to the offense, is something that I think is really interesting in terms of how EB calls this game. Because when the other offense is a little bit conservative, does EB get a little bit more conservative and say, let's make this a defensive special teams game more because of some of these concerns about some of the pieces they have in the back end, for example?
Definitely. Welcome on back. It is the Take Command pregame show live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. We're at halftime of the early games. We'll get you a scoreboard update in a little over 10 minutes from right now. Right now, though, we are going to welcome in Chris Russell, host, of course, of Russell on the Radio, the Chris Russell Show, every day from 1 to 4 before me on the Team 980. Rooster, how are you, sir?
Hello, Mr. Hoffman. Hello, Logan Paulsen. How are you guys?
Good, man. You doing all right?
Yeah, doing good, doing good. Just a Sunday, a little overcast, a little rain this morning. Feels kind of football-ish finally.
Yeah.
And, looking forward to today's game. I think this is an interesting test in week 2 for the Commanders because, you could make an argument that this is a really tough game to win, and then you can make an argument that this is a game that they should win probably.
Why do you say that you think this is a game that they should win?
Well, because I think the Broncos are still a mess. They certainly are on special teams. We know that, even though my guy Ben Kotwika is out there, Mike Westhoff is out there. We saw their place kicker miss a field goal, miss an extra point. Obviously, they committed the penalty on the onside kick to start. They're a little messy there, right? And then on top of that, and by the way, outside of Cameron Cheeseman, I mean, Joey Sly's been really good so far. I hope that doesn't come back to haunt him. And we know how good Tress Way is.
If it does, it's going to be the announcer jinx, right? That's 100% your fault.
That is true. That is true. And then on top of that, I do think, you guys were just talking about, I do think the offense is going to be a little bit better, today, even though they go against a terrific, and I mean terrific secondary. They are not going to have a lot of success, at least in my opinion, stretching the field vertically unless something else happens to open it up, or one of those guys slips and falls, or there's just a sick route or something like that. Because when you're going against Justin Simmons and you're going against Patrick Surtain, I don't think you're just going to naturally have a lot of success unless you're targeting the other guy. I forgot his name already. On the other side, which I think you can. I was talking to Tyler Columbus, Logan, one of your former teammates, the other day, and he was talking about the kid that's playing opposite of Surtain at the other corner. And again, I'm having trouble remembering his name, but maybe you can pick on him a little bit. But either way, I think the offense is going to be better. I think they learned some of what they can do, what they can't do. I think the running game will be a little bit better. I think they'll be a little bit more balanced. And I would love to see them, get into the natural running back screen, not just by check down a little bit earlier in this game, to get maybe some easy throws, some easy looks, some simplified things. And I think Eric Bieniemy will do that to help Sam Howell on the road against a pretty good but not outstanding pass rush.
You know what he can do then, Chris? They can draw up some stuff to pick on Damari Mathis.
There we go.
That's the kid.
You talked long enough for me to be able to look it up. That's how I knew that. Damari Mathis.
I was trying to buy time for you.
How slow do you think I am on the internet? Good gracious, man. Logan?
That's the kid, obviously. And listen, I mean, it doesn't always work out that way, but I think, I don't know how you guys feel, because I haven't heard either one of you on this, so maybe I'm just making this up. Last week, early on, they had success targeting the left side of the offense, deep vertical, with Diami, who Sam missed on that first drive on like a wheel route, kind of motion, play, and he was wide open. And then on the next drive, they hit the 35-yard pass interference to Terry on that same side in that same area. I wonder if they can isolate again their attack in the deep passing area, away from Surtain, away from Simmons, and kind of concentrating on that area to kind of pick on that kid a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would be interesting to check out. So in addition to kind of what this defensive secondary presents, do you have any insight on what this defensive front presents? Everyone keeps saying they should run the football this week, but I think Denver's front didn't.
Chris Russell's never going to suggest that.
I know. But, they did an excellent job against Las Vegas of keeping them in check. I think they had it was something like 0.1, 6 yards per rush.
It wound up being 62 yards total, so not very good.
Not a great day. Not a great day.
I mean, you hope maybe with Frank Clark, and I know he's not a big-time run stopper, but you hope with him out of there, maybe they have to make a couple of adjustments elsewhere. I tell you, Logan, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. Zach Allen is a guy that I've kind of been intrigued by.
Sure.
I was surprised Arizona let him go, and they didn't see him last week, but they sure as heck see him this week, and I wonder if that is going to help them shut the run. And if you can control the Commanders' run, which let's be honest, I mean, as long as Brian Robinson's not breaking tackle after tackle, it's not the hardest thing in the world to do, right? Because they're kind of physical, pounders, and we all know Antonio Gibson and ball security. If you shut down the Commanders' run on the road against a pretty good pass rush and a good secondary, what does that mean for Sam Howell in this offensive line? And the answer to that, I'll self-answer it, is I don't want to see what that means.
Sure.
Because that probably means trouble for me. So they better be able to get, some run game going, and not like a 30-8, split like there was in the first half last week, because I don't think you can survive that way against this Denver defense.
Chris Russell is with us here on the Team 980. Of course, we're also streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 and on 106.7 The Fan here on the Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day. When you look at the Commanders' defense, what concerns you about what Russell Wilson can still do at this stage of his career and what this defense showed? By the way, a defense that will have Chase Young today, obviously, for the first time since the preseason.
Yeah, I wonder if, even though we know Russ is not the athlete and the scrambler that he used to be, if he can just break contain, one or two times and that disrupts coverage holding up down the field against Judy, making his return, something like that. I wonder if an Adam Troutman can kind of break them down in the secondary, get behind somebody on the second, third level, what have you. So those are the things that I kind of worry about. Cortland Sutton, obviously, because I think, he's going to try and get rid of the football quickly. But if the Commanders' pass rush pressure can flush him out, and then he's got to roll away from it to try and get away from it, again, I wonder, does that contribute to a coverage breakdown? Now, I'll be interested to see, I don't know about you guys, how much the Commanders' defensive backs, specifically Emmanuel Forbes, obviously Benjamin St. Juste, and I guess even Kendall Fuller, how much they try and jump routes and balls and quick throws, because we know, I think Russ had the second least, I think it was completed air yards or whatever that NFL next-gen stats is. So we know he gets rid of the ball quickly, or at least they're going to try, and we know they're going to try and negate that pass rush. So I wonder if those defensive backs can jump a pass or two. And I predicted on my show on Friday at the end, I thought, I thought Emmanuel Forbes would have his first interception today and maybe even a big pick six or a big return, because I thought the Commanders' DBs would be able to jump something, anticipating quick throws and quick reads.
Well, if you want more bold predictions like that, you'll listen to Chris Russell 1 to 4 every single weekday on the Team 980. And I just personally would request that you continue listening beyond the show because there's this fella named Craig Hoffman that comes on after, and I heard he does an okay job.
He's also better looking and not as long with his answer, not as long-winded with his answers.
We all
the guy before him.
We all have our skills, Chris. We all have our skills. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Enjoy the rest of the early window. Enjoy the game, and we will. I guess I'll see you tomorrow on the changeover between shows.
Yeah, thank you, fellas.
Thanks,
Have a blueberry and some cottage cheese.
There we go.
Okay?
I'm lactose intolerant. I don't do the cottage cheese.
I do that.
All right. See you, Chris. That is Chris Russell, everybody, with us here on the Take Command pregame show. We are live from MGM National Harbor at Tap Sports Bar, which, by the way, forget blueberries and cottage cheese or whatever nonsense you want to say.
What'd you have?
I had some blackened shrimp tacos that were just absolutely phenomenal. The nachos did go by, also look good. So come hang out, get some great food. They got all the games on. They got Red Zone on. Obviously, if you're driving around and you're like, I would like to know the scores without being able to watch Red Zone because I'm driving, good news. We got a scoreboard update next. And then we'll get back into the breakdown as we are getting closer and closer to Commanders and Broncos here on a burgundy and gold game day.
Cincinnati? Was it Cincinnati?
That's depends on the story, but maybe we were playing Cincinnati.
So Logan catches this touchdown.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Cincinnati. Yep.
It was Cincinnati. So we put in this play, and it was like, I think we called it Hoss Juke or something like that. I can't remember what we called it in that offense, but Logan's on a seam, right? So he's our vertical threat, taking the top off the defense.
Digging out, guys.
We're talking in the week. I don't think we ever said it in the install with those guys, but they're like, listen, Logan's not even in the progression. He's taking the top off this thing. We're trying to work this little option route down. And they bust this coverage. And I mean, he is screaming wide open.
I wasn't even supposed to be on the play. They were supposed to sub somebody else in because I thought I was too slow to run this route. Just for the context here for everybody.
So he's screaming wide open. And I'm like, Matt, throw it at his back shoulder. You might hit him in stride. If you try and back shoulder him. Threw it right at him. He catches it. It was an awesome touchdown. Just the celebration afterwards was so much fun. For me, it was always fun celebrating the touchdowns with the guys that didn't score them all the time. You know, like
take that, Julio
like,
Jones.
Yeah, and I'm not, I'm saying that, but like your role for us was you did the dirty work, and when you see guys that do the dirty work get rewarded for it, that was really cool. Something I'll never forget. The caveman, man. The caveman was in there in the end zone celebrating. It was awesome.
So there was this play where we call it like it was, what is it, 19 Zorro. So basically like versus a 3-4 structure with an outside linebacker who is Von Miller in this case, I would get help from the fullback, like on inside help. So I could be really aggressive on my reach, really violent to the reach. And so it was me and DY, is a physical son of a gun. And so we take Von Miller and we put him, like, no joke, in the water cooler. Like we put him way out there on the sideline. And we were like, this guy ain't nothing. Like we're going to, we were so fired up. And so it ended up being like a 25 or 30 yard gain. So we were all fired up, and then Kyle's like, all right, let's come back to it. So like 2 plays later, we're running again, and we're running to the right. And I was like, oh man, we are about to tee this dude up real quick. Just tune him up nice and good. And so I go out to get him, and I'm firing off the ball. My hat's low. I'm flat back. And I swear to God, like he was about as close as my hand was to my face. And he just disappeared into like mist, and he like swung me, and I fell right on my face, and I just was like, oh my gosh. And like I went back and watched the film, and it was crazy how quickly he was able to like do his little basketball weave and then like just disappear from my vision and get inside and make the tackle. And I was like, oh, so now he's upset. So then the next play, I'm like all tentative and nervous. And I felt like Vaughn did. I watched this on film, so I knew he did this, but he does a really good job of like kind of like playing it like a boxer a little bit. You know what I mean? Like kind of rope-a-doping you a little bit. So like he lets you get one, right? Where I got after him. He makes you look like an idiot. And then the next time I was super tentative on him, and he literally did like a double stick, like he was going to make me miss, and then just grabbed my neck and then threw me over the pile. I was like, man, this is going to be tough. I got to like think of a plan here in the next 15 minutes so I don't look like an idiot for the rest of the game. But, when you're playing elite football players like him, like there's a reason they're elite. So if you get one on them, it's probably because they want. They probably because they're letting you get one.
It's a trap. It's a trap.
It's a trap.
Take Command pregame show live from MGM National Harbor. We are at Tap Sports Bar. We are also streaming live on YouTube, where you get to see Logan Paulsen there. I am Craig Hoffman, and it is time to go around the NFL. We'll get back into Commanders Broncos at the top of the hour. Take a look at the Denver offense and what the Commanders can do to stop it. Right now, though, the early game's all into the second half. Some interesting results. This one, the Falcons are lucky that this is a one-point game, as Desmond Ritter's thrown the ball to the wrong jersey a whole bunch. They haven't caught it nearly enough,
no
though.
picks, but yeah, he's definitely
he's got one earlier in the game. But Packers 10, Falcons 9 in Atlanta. Packers have the ball driving. They're already in long field goal range, but in field goal range.
But a very fun game to watch, though.
Yes, that's where your eyes have been a lot. Just kind of that's where the TVs are in this. In the sports book here, or the sports bar, I should say, at MGM National Harbor. Bijan Robinson, by the way, 9 carries, 72 yards.
He looks awesome.
For Atlanta. Yeah, he was worth the 8th pick. Bold prediction. Bills, talk about a bounce back after the Monday night loss to the Jets. 21-10 over the Raiders early third quarter. Josh Allen had, I think, an 85% completion percentage in the first half. Really highest efficient. Of his career. 176 for 2 scores already in this one.
Yeah, looks super efficient, looks super in control. Such a departure from what we saw. When was that? Monday night? Monday night, yeah.
Can you believe that was just Monday night?
I know. It was crazy.
That was the Aaron Rodgers Achilles game.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, Monday night. 7 years ago, Monday night. Ravens and Bengals, certainly plenty of purple here at Tap. So if you hear a loud cheer in the background, it's either the Packers table behind us or the Ravens fans scattered throughout the bar here. But they've had plenty to cheer about, and they got more there.
Wow,
right on cue. Interception for Baltimore as
in the red zone.
Cincinnati was driving. They're up as Baltimore 13-10. Joe Burrow's having another terrible day, Logan.
What's the stat line?
He threw for less than 100 yards in the first half. He still is sitting at 12 for 15, 84 yards, no touchdowns, and now that interception.
Yeah, that's tough. That's a bad pick there. Get that backside hook, that lurk player kind of matching the 3-by-1 side. Got to be a little bit more careful with the football there, probably.
I mean, I don't think you're obviously concerned in the long term because he's Joe Burrow. But, is this just him having a bad couple weeks? Is this what happens when you miss all the camp?
Yeah,
right?
He was hurt. Yeah, I think this is exactly what you expect, right? He's going to have a really hard time kind of getting himself right, and then Green Bay just scored a touchdown there on the play-action pass there. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, hey, if you hear loud noises, here's the two teams.
Yes, there we go.
Proven correct there. Jordan Love, a touchdown pass, 16-9 extra point pending now in Atlanta for Green Bay. And by the way, that 9 for Atlanta because my fantasy kicker missed an extra point earlier.
I know, yeah. What's he doing?
You hate to see that. Younghoe Koo, come on, through the uprights. Seahawks, Lions, Detroit, their offense still looking fantastic. Jared Goff's got 229 and 2 scores through 3 minutes of the third quarter. Seahawks trailing again. If they lose, Logan, they're 0-2 on the season. 21-14 right now the score.
They don't look right. That game's come on a couple times. They just don't look right offensively. And again, Detroit, man, they are so every week so competitive, so aggressive. Flea flicker for a touchdown to give them that last score. So they're always pulling out the stops no matter the opponent. I love that about Dan Campbell's team.
How about Amon-Ra St. Brown? Again, just killing it. Last year he had, 8 or 9 games in a row of 8+ receptions.
Yeah.
He's got 6 for 102 so far today. How about the Titans? They fell down double digits early, have bounced back. They're up on the Chargers, 17-14. Chargers do have the ball and are driving in the third quarter. Herbert, 138 and a score. Derrick Henry, 12 carries, 55 yards. And Treylon Burks, a guy that obviously a lot of people like coming out of the draft, goes to Tennessee. They're like, I don't know if that's a great fit. Well, good fit today. Tannehill found him on a big one. He's got 3 for 76.
That's not a bad day. Yeah, it's so funny, like Mike Vrabel, Dan Campbell, like these hard-nosed Mike Tomlin's like this a little bit, these coaches that are such culture builders, like they might, like Tennessee looked like the worst team in the NFL last week, and then all of a sudden now they're in a competitive football game, and you just love the motivation, you love the leadership, and again, never count those teams out.
No doubt. Bears and Buccaneers. Tampa looking to go 2-0. They're up 13-10 right now. How about Baker? Baker's got 245 already through the air on 16 of 23. No touchdowns, no picks. The Tampa touchdown coming on a Rashad White rush. But Baker's 16 of 23 for 245. They're halfway through the third quarter. Looking for a 300-yard day for Baker Mayfield. Justin Fields, meanwhile, 7 of 12 for 103, and he's got just 2 carries for 6 yards on the ground for Chicago.
Yeah, I mean Chicago. They're playing Tampa Bay, and I think that relationship between Baker and Mike Williams seems to be playing dividends. They had a huge catch early on. They're kind of throwing on timing, a little bit of a YOLO element to the throw, and when you have a big receiver like that with a guy with Baker's kind of skill set, I think that's going to be something that maybe is more dangerous than people want to talk about going into the year. But yeah, Bears not that great, but Tampa maybe he's got a little more juice than we thought.
Baltimore looking to take advantage of the turnover now in the red zone as Lamar Jackson just hit Zay Flowers for a huge gain. Flowers then a rush to follow it up. They're down inside the 5 early third quarter there. How about this one? It was 7-6 at halftime. It was like 3-0 deep into the second quarter in Jacksonville between the Chiefs and Jags. Then Patrick Mahomes woke up. He's got 2 touchdown passes now. It's 14-6 early third quarter. They just scored, did the Chiefs, on their early touchdown or on their first second half drive. Saw earlier, Jags doing a good job with Travis Kelce.
Yeah,
Kelce,
not anymore.
Yeah, only had 3 targets, 1 catch, 6 yards. Seems like the tide has turned.
Yeah, now he just scored a touchdown. Travis Kelce did, and he's the guy that gave him the 14 there. This is one of those things for Jacksonville that you're always super curious about. Like, is the team ready? Have they arrived? Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback. they are progressing, they are better. But in these games, like when I'm watching them offensively, they're on the screen over here. They just don't look like they're ready for the big moments versus the big boys, right? They're just kind of a tier below, the 49ers, the Kansas City Chiefs, all these different teams. Because in the big moments, they're a little bit quiet. And I don't know if that's because of Andy Reid's relationship to Peterson, because like they kind of come from the same tree. They know each other really well. But, they just don't ever look like they're ready. And Lawrence just got up kind of nursing his shoulder there. So going to be a long day for Jacksonville, looks like.
Just took a big hit. I think that was Karlaftis coming around the edge. Meanwhile, Mark Andrews in for Baltimore, so 19-10 extra point pending. And the easiest game of the day so far has come with quite the twist. Colts up 28-10 on Houston.
Dude, I kind of felt like it was going to go that way, though.
I mean, sure, the Texans are not very good, but offensive explosion for Indy without Anthony Richardson for part of this. He actually, I believe, scored two touchdowns on the ground earlier in the game. He went 6-10 through the air and then had 3 carries, 35 yards, 2 of them for touchdowns on the ground. But on the second one, he got hit and is out with a concussion. So Gardner Minshew has come in and gone a paltry, terrible. How could he have 2 incompletions? 11 of 13, Logan. The efficiency of Gardner Minshew and his mustache.
Got to respect the mustache, man. Got to respect it. And he, again, I think the Colts are going to be kind of sneaky good this year, especially if Richardson can stay healthy. Like watching the touchdown play, it's a fake jet sweep boot where he kind of, like Statue of Liberty, like hides the football while he's standing perfectly still. And his ability to sprint to the edge and outrun the pursuit, like he is a special athlete. Everyone talks about Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. Like to have the raw, like straight line speed that he has at the size that he has it, if he can like not do something dumb, like on that play, he gets hit by the DB, falls down, and then hits his head on the ground. That's how he gets the concussion. Like he's got to protect himself a little bit better.
Yeah.
But they're going to be scary, I think, if they can handle that.
49ers, Rams, Giants, Cardinals, Jets, Cowboys, of course, Commanders, Broncos, the late window, Dolphins, Patriots tonight for Sunday Night Football. And then you got the dual Monday Nighter this week, Saints, Panthers at 7:15, 8:15, Browns and Steelers.
Dude, I'm excited for the Browns, man. I'm excited for them, aren't you?
No.
Because the defense is coming along.
I can't be excited for the Browns because Deshaun Watson's on their football team, and that's just never going to change until he's gone. But from the football standpoint, yeah, and like their defense, they're an exciting football team without question.
DeJuan Jones, man, getting the start. I mean, gosh, lots of stuff there that is interesting and not that important. Maybe.
Yeah.
Quote Ron.
Maybe. I don't know. Where is it on the Rivera scale?
Yeah.
A question we ask far too often. All right, that's Logan. I'm Craig. This is the Take Command pregame show on the Team 980. Normally simulcast as well on 106.7 The Fan, but Nats baseball there as we are in the afternoon window. Nats and Dodgers. And, of course, we are streaming live on both YouTube channels as well, so you can check us out there. Just subscribe to the Team 980 or 106.7 The Fans channel, and as soon as we go live, you'll get an alert, or we'll be at the top of your recommendations if you want to watch us on your smart TV. We're the only full-length pregame show that you can watch or listen to in the DMV, so, might as well check us out on any of those platforms or streaming live on the audio on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, Russell Wilson and Sean Payton, a marriage that has been much talked about, but how does that marriage and what we saw from it in week 1 go up against the he's watching right there. If you came over here, we could do like an Inception thing. I think that's probably unnecessary. But hey, proof. We're on YouTube. My guy right there is watching us. Which is weird because he can see us right there.
There we go. Right there.
Inception.
Boom. Inception.
Boom. Excellent. Wonderful. Wow, that is special. All right, what was I saying? Sean Payton, Russell Wilson.
That's where we're going.
How do they match up with the Commanders' defense? That's next on the Take Command pregame show. For Parker Gabriel, the Broncos beat reporter for the Denver Post. What's Eric Bieniemy's history against the Broncos? Like, how have the Chiefs performed? Division rivalries are always wacky. You see them twice a year, but there's obviously familiarity with EB going back to the days when Vance Joseph was there the first time around in Denver. So what's kind of the success rate for Bieniemy versus Joseph over the years?
Yeah, well, it's pretty good. I don't think that's all Vance's fault necessarily.
Yeah, there was that Mahomes fellow, which tends to help.
Yeah, the Broncos have not yet beat Patrick Mahomes. So the Chiefs have won 15 straight in that series. So that goes back that series goes that winning streak goes back even before Vance Joseph was the Broncos head coach or Eric Bieniemy was in Kansas City. So certainly he's had the upper hand. They're close friends. They know each other really well. Vance spoke with reporters here today, said someone as he was walking to the podium said, I bet Eric Bieniemy's had you on the mind all week, and Vance laughed and he said, yeah, well, he better. And so it's just all in good fun. They're friends. They've known each other forever. But as it pertains to Eric Bieniemy, teams versus Vance Joseph teams, yeah, that's been all Kansas City, just like the rivalry in general.
Let's not get it twisted. Maybe this is the most important thing. This is a very good defense. Like, this is a very fast defense. It's a very physical defense. It is a very different challenge and perspective than it was last week. So really curious to see what the plan is. And I do think that their defense's relationship, Denver's defense's relationship to the offense, is something that I think is really interesting in terms of how EB calls this game. Because when you know the other offense is a little bit conservative, does EB get a little bit more conservative and say, let's make this a defensive special teams game more because of some of these concerns about some of the pieces they have in the back end, for example?
Definitely. Take Command pregame show live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor in Oxon Hill, Maryland. Come hang out with us each and every week, 3 hours before the Commanders game begins, as we are now about 90 minutes from said game beginning. Logan Paulsen there. I am Craig Hoffman, and we are now getting into the witching hour, Logan, as they call it on NFL Red Zone. We are getting to the end here.
Of some of these games.
Yeah, I think some Bengals fans are upset. There's a T. Higgins catch that they just got waved off. That would have been a touchdown. And
this Atlanta game had the touchdown reversed. Yeah,
touchdown reversed on replay in Atlanta as well. So they're still in the red zone as opposed to having scored We'll let you know as games go final. Of course, most of our focus, though, on Commanders Broncos coming up at 4:25. And let's take a look at the Commanders offense, Jack Del Rio's unit against Sean Payton, Joe Lombardi, and this Denver offense. What do you make of what, both preseason and what you saw in week 1 of what Denver is trying to do and how that matches up with what Washington puts out there?
Well, I mean, this is something we've talked about pretty extensively on the podcast. I think they're trying to limit Russ's opportunities. I think that's what, Sean Payton did when he was in New Orleans with anybody who wasn't Drew Brees. You kind of want to manage the game, lean on the defense, run the football, play action pass, screens, quick game, all those types of things that are kind of not very attractive to fans. Slow the game down, possess, be efficient, win the turnover battle like we talked about. They won the turnover battle last week. They probably should have won the game if the kicker makes the kicks. But I look at that and I say that's what they want to be. It's not like Russell Wilson is out there balling, dealing like he was in Seattle. There were elements of kind of him getting out of the pocket. The 2 touchdowns that they scored is him escaping to his right off of inside pressure off the rush. So there is an element of that. But they really want to lean on the running backs. They really want to lean on kind of the play action. And then, I've said this is something I've been saying all week on everything I've done, is they do a really good job of picking their moments for the shot. Does that make sense what I'm saying? When it's time to hit a home run, they want to take it and they want it to be wide open. And last week there was a couple opportunities that just didn't quite hit the way I think they wanted it to hit. But I do think that, that's kind of what I'd say. Much more conservative than they were last year, much more conservative than anything you saw when they were when Russell was in Seattle. So very similar to what you saw the tail end of Drew Brees' career, and then when Sean Payton didn't have him with kind of that collection of quarterbacks there in New Orleans.
It's so funny because Payton was a guy, the Payton-Brees relationship was one where Brees was off in the reins and Payton was the aggressive guy. And then when Brees left, he's like, oh, right, I have to now be the responsible one in the room, if you will, with a Jameis Winston, for instance, who he took from a 30-touchdown, 30-interception guy in Tampa, the only one in NFL history, to a really efficient, good player for that 1 year they were together in New Orleans. You mentioned Russell specifically escaping right.
Sure.
Do you play with your defensive end rotation today if you're Jack Del Rio and try to get Montez Sweat over to that right side as often as possible? Do you trust Chase Young in his first action this season in that spot? As Casey and James rotate in, I don't think you'll see a lot of Andre Jones today.
Sure.
He'll be the one who loses reps if he's not even
inactive.
if he's even active. How do you manage your personnel knowing that when Russ escapes, right is the direction he is most dangerous, because that's obviously his throwing side?
Yeah, well, Montez usually lines up on that right, on the offensive right anyway, defensive left. So I do think that that's a good matchup. Obviously, that's against Mike McGlinchey, the right tackle that they just signed from San Francisco. I think Mike's a good player. I don't think he's a great player, and I think he has a really hard time with good power rushers. And I think Sweat's he's not he's not like an elite power rusher, for example, but he does a pretty good job of that stuff. So, and now that I'm talking about it, I think I actually have it backwards in terms of where Montez Sweat lines up.
Well, it was interesting because in camp, he
was a little bit more diverse.
He did a lot of work over there because it was Sweat versus Wiley most days in camp.
Yes.
But last week, James Smith-Williams was definitely on that side more. And and that actually is an interesting question, right?
Yeah.
It's is that a Chase Young preference?
Yeah.
And if so, is the rotation going to be, is Montez good on either side? Chase really likes the defensive right, offensive left, and thus Montez will be over there. Or, do they switch it up? What does it go?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think one of the things that sticks out about that is just the thing, with Chase coming back, all this different stuff is discipline rush. Because say what you want about Montez, he's been very consistent and disciplined in rushing with the guy that he's next to. And when you talk to the guys in the building, or the rumor is when you talk to guys in the building, this comes from John Keim, is that they like rushing next to him. Because he does what he's supposed to do, because he is where he's supposed to be.
Payne, Allen, Big Phil, when he's out there, obviously. Those guys would rather be lined up next to Montez.
Yeah, because I think that, Montez he does what he's supposed to do. And it's probably at some points to his, personal detriment in terms of sack total, but it's to the defensive benefit. And so when Chase comes back, he'll be back today in pass rushing situations most likely. can he be more disciplined? And I think that's kind of to your point, is like, where do you put that piece that's a little bit of a question mark? And I'd probably put Montez on the offensive right, match him up with Mike McGlinchey. I think that's a really good matchup. I think you're going to see a lot of kind of power rushes and a guy that doesn't really set that bull super great. He's a good player, but I like those matchups, and I think I'd probably put him there, just trusting that he's going to do what he's supposed to do.
Yeah, definitely. I think I was listening to actually Kime's podcast earlier on the way in over here, and one of the things he was talking about with Jeff Legwold, who is Kime's compatriot with ESPN out in Denver, is earlier in his career, like Russell was a little bit faster and obviously a little more athletic, and he could get out of the pocket so well. And this version of Russell Wilson is not quite that. Faster than he was last year. He's dropped about 15 pounds this offseason. Well documented out there in Denver. But the other thing I think about is how the game has evolved over the last decade. And, were there freak athletes on the edge 10 years ago? Sure. But there weren't a ton of guys that are running around like Montez Sweat ever in the history of this league. And that is one thing to think about today specifically. If Russ is trying to run away from Montez, like Montez Sweat runs a 4.4.
Yeah.
And so literally trying to get the edge is impossible. So what happens, though, this is the kind of that cat and mouse game that you're talking about. When do you call the shots? When do you do certain things as a play caller?
Yeah.
Do you catch James Smith-Williams, Casey Tuhill in the game, call your shot knowing you might have a little more time, as Washington does their regular rotations?
Yeah.
Those guys do not play 100% of the snaps.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, another thing that came out of that interview that John had with the gentleman from Denver was just this idea that, like, Russ is a guy who wants to take shots down the field. He wants to push the ball down the field. And the NFL now, the coverage structures are such that they prevent that from happening. So in conjunction with the more athletic defensive linemen, the coverage structures don't let that happen as much. So it kind of takes him completely out of his comfort zone. So if you're jacked, you just kind of say, like, hey, man, they want to run the football, let's let them run the ball. And when we got to get kind of batten down the hatches in those kind of specific situations, the strike zone, the red zone, we get it done, we hold them to field goals, and we win a game, 14, 15 to 17 or whatever it is. And I think that's a very plausible thing is, again, taking away what Russ likes, using your rushers in a disciplined manner. And Ron said something really interesting. I do that game plan show with him, which comes out in the morning on Sunday. And one of the things he said is, like, we're going to give those guys opportunities to take their shots, to be aggressive and kind of build the defense around those opportunities. So that's something I think is also interesting. It's not always like, hey, you're only going to be in these yellow rushes, these conservative bull rushes where we're collapsing the pocket. It's like, maybe through pressure, maybe through line stunts, we're going to give you an opportunity where you can just kind of go get it and see if you can beat the guy in front of you, which I think is great. And I think it's something that I love, that kind of thought process in conjunction with this understanding of who Russ is now as a player.
So there's something you said there that sparked another question, follow-up for me. We'll continue talking about the Denver offense, how they match up with the Commanders' defense, and a certain group of players who could be put in the spotlight today. Grant Paulsen still going to join us as well. Our picks for the game coming for the end of the show. The Take Command pregame show continues in less than 5 minutes here on a Burgundy and Gold game day from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor, where we are also streaming live on YouTube. When you look at Sam Howell's day, there's obviously some good. There's obviously some yikes. When you look at his decision-making, though, let's start there, and then we'll get into some of the protection issues. But decision-making wise and kind of how he executed the throws that he was asked to, what'd you make of his day?
Yeah, so I don't want to come off like I'm being like overly optimistic about Sam Howell's performance. Like, I want to ground this in some sense of reality. Like, can he play better? Like, absolutely. But I actually thought he played pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, it was like a good first outing. I know he had the pick. I know he had the fumble. The pick, I thought, like, we just watched that together, and I think that he was, just a little bit later. His footwork was a little bit off. Like, it just didn't seem like the timing of the depth of the route matched up with his feet necessarily. And because he's waiting so long to throw the football, obviously the ball gets tipped and then gets picked off. And then on the sack force fumble, I don't necessarily think that's anybody's fault. I think, obviously Wiley gives up the sack, but that's a great rush by Gardak right there at number 45 for the Arizona Cardinals on the spin move. And it's a tough look. The guard and Wiley are kind of on different levels and leaves a little bit of space for the inside move. And then Sam's just trying to make a play probably when he needs to know that, like, I don't need to do that right there.
Yeah, that would be my thing on the fumble is that the fumble is bad because time score situation. Like you got to be okay punting, and you just got to. It's not to your blind side. You saw it coming. Just eat the football and make sure that you get it onto the foot of Tressway there.
Yeah, and I think we both agree with that. You know, and I think that's what you get though with young players. You know, you get I think that people forget people want him to come out and be like this amazing football player right away, and I think he's doing a pretty good job.
Last guy to mention real quick, Antonio Gibson. How concerned are we about the fumble?
I mean, it is concerning because it just seems to be like a consistent thing with him. You know, I like him. I like him as a player. I think I like him as a person. He's awesome around the building and stuff. But in any offense, ball security is job security. That is something that is so important. And for that fumble to come in the red zone, as you're going in to score, it is a big deal. And he's running hard. He's doing everything you want. I think he makes a nice cut on that. But I think he's going to get less touches, you know, if that continues to be an issue. And EB's always been very good, at least in my experience with him, about coming back to guys after they have an issue, you know. And, you know, Gibson catches the screen in the fourth quarter that ends up being I think it was an 11-yard gain.
Yeah, it should have been a first down.
Right.
The referees decided that they were going to have a terrible day, so it wasn't.
Right. But, you know, he's going to be a productive member of this offense, but I don't know if he's going to get. I don't know if I think what I think is potentially in the future here is Rodriguez get more touches on the first, second down type of ballpark that would have normally gone to Gibson, and then Gibson kind of moves into that satellite player role kind of exclusively. So it's week one. I'm not a guy to overreact, but the fact that there's this kind of fumbling history in Gibson's past, you know, makes me a little bit come on, we got to get that cleared up.
Take Command pregame show live from MGM National Harbor. We are at Tap Sports Bar. Come and hang out with us each and every week, 3 hours before kick, which of course today is a 4:25 kick, just over an hour from now. At is it Vesco Field, maybe, Logan, something like that?
Yeah, I have no idea.
It's Mile High Stadium.
Yeah,
it's Mile High Stadium. That is Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman here on the Team 980, where we bring you the injury report brought to you by the Centers for Advanced Orthopedics. More physicians, more locations, more advanced care centered around one thing, you. Visit CFAortho.com. Do this quickly, and then back to the group of players that I think is in the spotlight today. No surprises on the inactive list that just came out. Quan Martin is the one injury scratch. He is in the concussion protocol. He is out today. Also, KJ Henry remains out, so Andre Jones Jr. will be up. That's more of a special teams call. And then same 3 as last week. Trent Scott, Chris Paul, which means Ricky Stromberg is your backup swing guard. And then Curtis Hodges, the tight end, is inactive as well. We were talking, though, about the Denver offense, Logan, and a group that could be really put to the test today. And I'm going to call it the second level of the defense, because if we just say the linebackers, that's typically going to leave out whatever safety is coming down in the box. This is a team that plays 2 backers most of the time, often plays 1 backer, and then a player who is most likely, most often, Cam Curl on that layer as well. Now, you said if you're Jack Del Rio, you might just look at Denver and say, we're not going to let Russ cook. We're not going to let him get these deeper shots. We're going to invite you to run the ball. We know that you want to, but we trust that we can stop it. That puts a lot of pressure on the linebackers. Are they up to that task?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at Jamin Davis specifically from week 1, like he was awesome, man. He's playing with such a confidence and a physicality that you just love to see from him. I think Cam had an excellent game, kind of playing that Buffalo nickel that, that it's a regular nickel, but it's played in running situations, I guess is how I'd characterize the Buffalo nickel. So he did a great job taking on offensive linemen, making tackles, being physical. So I love to see that. I think the one guy that struggled a little bit was Cody. We talked about Cody a little bit, and I think we like Cody as a person, and like the film of him in Seattle.
Maybe I've never talked to the man in my life.
Yeah, but I'm saying there's
never heard a bad thing around the building. Seems to work hard. All
correct.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what I'd say is just like the thing that sticks out to me is he needs to play some better football. In terms of making sure we're peeling the double teams, we're giving John Allen and Deron Payne one-on-one situations when we're not in the single front. I think he did an okay job calling the defense. There didn't seem to be an issue there. But in terms of just down-to-down play, I think he needs to be a little bit more consistent. So that would be my one question mark today, because I think the interior of this offensive line for Denver is a pretty good group. I think, Powers is the guy they paid $55 million to. He's their left guard. Their right guard is kind of I think he's a third-year guy out of a small school. Good football player, though. I like watching him play. And then Quisenberry is the center who has kind of been up and down over the course of his career, and I think a lot of people see that as a weak spot of the offensive line. I personally think that they do a good job insulating him with the guard play. But, that's who he's going to be seeing, when we're talking about Cody from a down-to-down perspective. So I think hopefully he has a better game this week, because I do think, to your point, they're going to test that second level of the defense quite a bit in terms of how they run the football. And if Jack wants to play more conservative coverage structures, he really needs to make sure he steps up.
So this would go counter to that on some level, because if you're playing Cinco front, you're not inviting the run. But
okay, so let's talk about that real quick.
Okay.
So,
well, here, let me just finish my thought, because otherwise I'll lose it. In theory, if you got 5 defensive linemen on the field, you're kind of saying, hey, pass it. Because running against this is going to be bad. But if I'm Jack and I'm trying to either make it easier for my defensive linemen to get off blocks, or I'm trying to get them one-on-ones in pass situations, if I can isolate that center or that young guard who are not as experienced, not give them the help of each other or someone who you just paid a bunch of money on the other side, that seems advantageous. To me, I would not be surprised if they play a ton of Cinco today, because there are some one-on-one matchups that would be very good for this Commanders defensive line up front.
Yeah, so I think the Cinco front, that is a little bit of a misconception when it comes to stopping the run. Obviously, that is what they use traditionally to stop the run, but stopping the run is about math. It's just simple numbers, right?
Well, no wonder I couldn't figure it out, Logan.
So
we've met.
So let's say you've got a 7-man blocking surface plus the running back. So you got a tight end and a fullback, or 2 tight ends, whatever it is, and you play the Cinco front. That's 5 guys plus 2 linebackers. You're still technically short, because you only have 7 people to stop the run. So you have 1 for every blocker, and then you don't have anyone for the back.
Right,
so
which
usually
is important because he's the guy with the ball.
Yeah, so usually you need 8 guys. So in the Cinco front, what they've traditionally been able to do is let Ridgeway kind of play a 2 gap, so a gap and a half, and then let John and Payne kind of just win their one-on-ones, and usually that covers up some of the gap stuff you run into. However, when you play a team like Atlanta, who we're not playing this week, but what they do a really good job of is stressing those rules gap by gap, and they will point out if you're short. That's why they had a hard time stopping the run. I don't think Denver runs the football that way, so they probably could get away with the Cinco front. get away with those 2 linebackers, get away with or Cody and Cam in the box there, and then play those softer coverage structures, which is what you're looking for. They brought a couple zone pressures or fire dogs where you're dropping Casey Tuhill or Montez Sweat off into coverage, and that was very, very effective. So it gives you some flexibility, and I do expect to see it quite a bit today. It's just how far do they commit? Because I think when you play teams like Tennessee, you see their single front, it's got 2 linebackers in it, and Cam's rotating down to the box. So they are playing like a true 8-man front, as opposed to kind of what we're talking about, where they're going to be a little bit light in box structure, and as a result, maybe be a little bit more susceptible, even though they've got bigger personnel on the field.
So let's talk aggression real quick, because I think one of the things that seems to be, I don't want to say a theme, a hypothesis for a lot of analysts, myself included, about both of these teams is they want to kind of play more conservatively, let another team make mistake, trust the fact that their defense is going to be good enough. But on the defensive side, like, you can also ratchet up pressure.
Sure.
Wink Martindale on one end of the scale, and whoever we want to put on the other end.
Vic Fangio.
Yeah, Vic
probably.
Fangio on the other end of we're going to go all out and
Sure.
blitz everything, or we're going to sit back and just trust our rush. So when you think of the aggression level, and this becomes a total team thing about what you think your offense is capable of on the other side as well, how much pressure do you expect to ramp up if you're Jack? Or do you just kind of sit back and say, look, if we don't give this Denver offense opportunities, like if we don't take high-risk risks, they're not going to be able to beat us over the course of 4 quarters. That's the direction I would lean. I would just trust my coverage, trust my basic rushes, mix it up just enough to keep them uncomfortable. But I could also see, hey, let's heat Russ up and make him make plays, because we don't think he can do that anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if I would do that, honestly. I think this team has been built and this roster has been constructed in the version that you've described there, where it's like we have 4 awesome pass rushers, especially today with Chase. And we've talked about the depth pieces there as well. We don't need to do – like, everyone in the NFL is trying their absolute hardest to win with a 4-man rush. And we have built this team to win with a 4-man rush. Like that's how the Martys, that's how Ron, that's how they envision this team. That's why they've moved to a 4-down structure predominantly, because Jack had to change his defensive system coming here. And it's because they've got the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse up there. And you should be able to do that. And with the coverage guys in the back end, they should be fine. And if I don't have to blitz to create that pressure, then I should be fine. So if I'm him, I'm probably planning on those guys winning. But like you said, I want enough variation in terms of run stunts, in terms of line stunts, in terms of games, in terms of pass rush games, that the offensive line has to play it a specific way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
While still kind of keeping the conservative nature of my ultimate defensive philosophy.
Russell Wilson last week, by the way, 27 of 34. That's 79.4%. 2 touchdowns, no picks. That was good for 108 rating. Second highest completion percentage and 5th highest rated among QBs in week 1. He had 2 touchdown passes, or he has 2 touchdown passes in 3 of his career games against Washington of the 4, and he's aiming for his 5th in a row at home with 95 plus, and a 4th in a row at home with at least 2 touchdown passes. So some pass success at home, some pass success against Washington for Russell Wilson. Speaking of pass success against Washington, Jerry Jeudy had 4 catches in their last meeting. He will make his season debut today. Also finished last season very strong. Final 5 games last year, 5+ catches, career high 154 receiving yards in week 18. When we get back, what about the Commanders' star receiver? Can they get Terry McLaurin more involved?
Sure.
Do they need to get Terry McLaurin more involved? We will discuss. And then Grant Paulsen will join us at 4 o'clock. We'll pick the game as well, a final look around the scoreboard. All still to come. We are now officially less than an hour away from kick here on the Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day.
Cincinnati?
That's depends on the story, but maybe we were playing Cincinnati.
So Logan catches this touchdown.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Cincinnati. Yep.
Cincinnati. So we put in this play, and it was like, I think we called it Hoss Juke or something like that. I can't remember what we called it in that offense, but Logan's on a seam, right? So he's our vertical threat, taking the top off the defense.
Digging out, guys.
we're talking in the week. I don't think we ever said it in the install with those guys, but they're like, listen, Logan's not even in the progression. He's taking the top off this thing. We're trying to work this little option route down. And they bust this coverage. And I mean, he is screaming wide open.
I wasn't even supposed to be on the play. They were supposed to sub somebody else in because I thought I was too slow to run this route. Just for the context here for everybody.
So he's screaming wide open. And I'm like, Matt, throw it at his back shoulder. You might hit him in stride. You might hit him in stride if you try and back shoulder him. Threw it right at him. He catches it. It was an awesome touchdown. Yeah. Just the celebration afterwards was so much fun. For me, it was always fun celebrating the touchdowns with the guys that didn't score them all the time. You know, like
take that, Julio Jones.
Yeah, and I'm not, I'm saying that, but like your role for us was you did the dirty work, and when you see guys that do the dirty work get rewarded for it, that was really cool. Something I'll never forget. The caveman. Yeah. And the caveman was in there in the end zone celebrating. It was awesome.
So there was this play where we call it like it was, what is it, 19 Zorro. So basically like versus a 3-4 structure with an outside linebacker who is Von Miller in this case, I would get help from the fullback, like on inside help. So I could be really aggressive on my reach, really violent to the reach. And so it's me and DY, and DY, is a physical son of a gun. And so we take Von Miller and we put him, like, no joke, in the water cooler. Like we put him way out there on the sideline. And we were like, this guy ain't nothing. Like we're going to, we were so fired up. And so it ended up being like a 25 or 30 yard gain. So we were all fired up, and then Kyle's like, all right, let's come back to it. So like 2 plays later, we're running again, and we're running to the right. And I was like, oh man, we are about to tee this dude up real quick. Just tune him up nice and good. And so I go out to get him, and I'm firing off the ball. My hat's low. I'm flat back. And I swear to God, like he was about as close as my hand was to my face, and he just disappeared into like mist. And he like swung me, and I fell right on my face. And I just was like, oh my gosh. And like I went back and watched the film, and it was crazy how quickly he was able to like do his little basketball weave and then like just disappear from my vision and get inside and make the tackle. And I was like, oh, so now he's upset. So then the next play, I'm like all tentative and nervous. And I felt like Vaughn did. I watched this on film, so I knew he did this, but he does a really good job of like kind of like playing it like a boxer a little bit. You know what I mean? Like kind of rope-a-doping you a little bit. So like he lets you get one, right? Where I got after him. He makes you look like an idiot. And then the next time I was super tentative on him, and he literally did like a double stick like he was going to make me miss, and then just grabbed my neck and then threw me over the pile. I was like, man, this is going to be tough. I got to like think of a plan here in the next 15 minutes so I don't look like an idiot for the rest of the game. But, when you're playing elite football players like him, like there's a reason they're elite. So if you get one on them, it's probably because they want. They probably because they're letting you get one.
It's a trap. It's a trap.
It's a trap.
Welcome back to the Take Command pregame show. That is Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman. We are live at Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. You come hang out with us 3 hours before each and every kick. We'll be back next weekend at 10 a.m. I think the doors open at 11.
Yeah.
So, it is a sports bar. It's a lovely sports bar. Logan was actually saying earlier, he's like, I got to come to sports bars more often. This is the kind of sports bar that makes you want to hang out at sports bars.
Correct. That is right.
So
all the games are on. Everyone's good vibes. So, yeah.
So we'll be here at 10. They'll let you in at 11. So we'll see you next week then. We'll be right back here on the internet, so to speak, Logan, after the game, about 90 minutes after the final whistle. Logan and I will reconvene for the Take Command postgame podcast, which we are now streaming live on the Team 980 and 106.7 The Fans YouTube page, where we are, again, streaming live right now. So if you're driving around and you're on your way home and want to just keep listening to the pregame show without being in your car, flip us on your smart TV. Open up the YouTube app and either the Fan or the Team 980's YouTube page, and you can watch us there. Okay, so Terry McLaurin has just 4 targets last week, Logan, officially. And I think that is something that's important to stand out. How much different is this conversation if the pass interference call that goes to him is a catch or is counted in his receiving statistics? Probably slightly different, but it definitely didn't feel like he had a massive impact on that game, nearly as much run as a Logan Thomas, as a Jahan Dotson. Let's first, before we talk about what could change, and hear from Eric Bieniemy on the subject, how would you evaluate the way Terry was used and the way he played last week?
I mean, I didn't really have a problem with it. Did you have a problem with how it was used? I mean, I think this is like a characteristic of the offense. It's going to be a different guy every week, different guy with different opportunities. Like, it's up to the quarterback to read through the concepts. I do think you could make him the number 1 receiver more often if you really want to get him more touches.
That is something I would like to see.
The number 1 read, but I think overall it's kind of like he's like this is probably how it's going to go. There's going to be a game where it's 4, a game where it's 10. It's going to kind of ebb and flow like that, and also based on matchups.
I am not overly concerned because it was week 1 and it was Arizona.
Yeah.
If this becomes a trend, I hate it. I would like to see the guy you paid all that money because he's so good at football get the ball. And I do think this is something that coaches in the NFL and people around it who analyze the game, who are very smart, often overthink. And they'll give you all the schematic reasons in the world why X, Y, or Z is happening. And I go, yeah, sure, but Justin Jefferson gets 1,000 targets a game.
Yeah.
And it's because he's really good, and Kevin O'Connell has realized the best way to win is for us to get the good guy the ball. And I think that is true for every team. The best way to win is to get their best players the ball.
Yeah.
And some are just more dedicated to it than others. I'm not concerned after 1 week, but it is something that you kind of stick a pin in and say, I'm monitoring this.
Yeah, and also I do think, like, to make the comp to Justin Jefferson or Tyreek Hill, like, that's a different caliber of guy where, like, they're always kind of open and you can build your whole offense around their skill set. And what I mean is, like, I think Terry's very, 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 very good, but he's not always the most efficient route runner or the short area guy. Like, Justin Jefferson, literally, like, I had a conversation with someone from Minnesota, and they were like, he can win at every level of the defense in a way that's so unique to him. So I think it's also kind of, again, much like we were talking about with Gibson, you're speaking to a skill set. You know, you're speaking to what Terry does well. And this offense is a little bit different than last year's offense, which I thought was more in Terry's wheelhouse. It's very vertical, lots of stuff attacking down the field. This is a little bit different. So I think it'll take maybe, I don't want to say take time, because I think EB understands who and what Terry can do. But I think there is going to be a little bit of an adjustment period. And, again, it's not something I'm worried about, but it's something, again, to monitor and just kind of see how both parties are adjusting to it.
Yeah, that's Logan Paulsen, Craig Hoffman here on the Take Command pregame show. I do think one thing that we saw in training camp that we will see more throughout the season, though, is some of the game plan touches, if you will, the screens, the jet sweeps, that kind of stuff, which we didn't see, obviously, for Terry in week 1. That certainly will be coming.
Yeah, and even to that point, though, like, game plan touches to me are like, can you line him up as the Z on certain plays? Can you line him up as the F on certain plays? Just to make sure he's getting some type of targets. It doesn't need to be overly creative or innovative. I don't need 5 screens or 5 bubbles to Terry. Like, if we want to get him touches, like Kyle used to do this with Julio Jones in Atlanta, like, or any good receiver. He did this with Pierre when he was here. It's like you can formation the play so that he's the number 1 guy. Like, I remember we used to have all these concepts that were to the Z, because the Z, there's, you know, the tight end, the fullback, and the Z are to that side, so you can kind of create this pattern that opens up coverage, and the X is kind of over there by himself. So Kyle had the similar thought to what you had. So, like, let's find ways to get that X more involved. So we'd formation it so the X would line up to the tight end, and the F would line up to that side as well. And there are ways like that I think as we go we'll get more explored more and get him more touches. So.
Yeah, that will be interesting to watch. The guy, of course, who has got to do all that is Eric Bieniemy. Here was EB earlier this week when asked about Terry's usage in week 1.
Well, I would say this. I would say the Commanders came away with a victory, and Terry was about as happy as anybody. And so you got to understand, in order to build a great team, you got to learn to appreciate winning. And so wins are hard to come by. The numbers will take care of themselves. The thing that I appreciate is the leadership that he provided during that process. Because when things wasn't going good, you got to be able to lean on your leaders. You got to be able to lean on them to provide these guys some expertise in making sure that we're staying together. Those are the moments that I love throughout the course of the game. You never really want to live through that experience, but you want to see those guys rise to the challenge. And so I can tell you right now, the last thing Terry's worried about is the number of targets. Okay, he's 1-0. He got an opportunity to play at home, with a fan base that came out to support him and his team.
That's all true right now.
What an excellent answer.
Yeah, I mean, look, EB's a masterclass in this stuff. He's so good at it, which makes it all the more mind-blowing that he's never been a head coach in the league. It's just like how 32 NFL owners decided there's better dudes than that to be a head coach.
Yeah.
That's a different discussion for a different
time.
But we all know that, as long as you're winning, that's fine. And a guy like Terry is definitely unselfish.
Yeah, very team-driven guy.
Very team-driven. But the second it goes sideways, if he hasn't been getting the ball, he is a receiver. And he is going to want the ball through the motivation that he's like, hey, man, I can help us win. And so no matter the prescription, whether it's because I'm a diva and I need my touches or because, hey, we're not winning or we're not scoring 20-plus points a game and we think we're capable, eventually they're going to need to make sure that he's getting said touches. And, it's a great answer. It's true. It's also easier to do after 1 week, and eventually they will have to get him find ways to get him the football, which, by the way, just to be very clear, I don't think is going to be a problem in the long term.
Yeah, and it wasn't like he didn't get a lot of targets. I get 5 targets, right? Including the
5, including the PI.
Yeah,
sure.
so to me, I'm like, that's a pretty good day, versus I don't know, we'll see. Obviously, you want guys get more touches and exploiting matchups and all those kinds of things, but I'm also like, that's not a bad day at the office, is what I'm saying. For a guy that. When I played with Julio, this is a great example. There would be weeks where he'd get 3 targets, and then there's weeks where he gets 15. So it's part of the ebb and flow of a season and a play caller and exploiting matchups and finding who's got the hot hand. And to defend the way they allocated targets, Sheehan was the guy coming out of training camp that really stood out to me above everybody else. So, maybe there's this shift in the staff about him being the number one or him being the number one option on certain concepts. We have a lot of playmakers, and there's only one football. And I think this is part of the NFL process, I guess, in cultivating an offense.
So that's a great context and perspective of the ebbs and the flows. I think people were upset when they see Logan Thomas continuing to get fed, and he obviously had the drops early. And it's the irrational emotions of a game.
I get it. Yeah.
And that's part of it. But that's why we sit back, we take a second, we analyze, and we continue marching forward. One thing that we haven't mentioned yet, which is a bad job by us, I'm just going to own this. There are 2 dudes in that Denver secondary that are as good as anybody else playing their position in the entire league. Justin Simmons as a safety is phenomenal. Perhaps we'll talk about him in the next segment. But I want to talk about the Surtain strategy here. Pat Surtain II is arguably the best cover corner in the NFL at this point. He's putting his name up there. I know that sounds crazy because he doesn't have that rep.
No.
But if you watch it and you listen to guys who cover him, he just shuts down the other team's best player every single week.
100%.
Devontae Adams could not get free. Not get free last week against Pat Surtain, and eventually Josh McDaniels was like, I think we should line up Devontae on the other side, and he started to get going a little bit. Which is good news because it means, Surtain's not really traveling and you can get your best players away. But, do you even mess with that side? Or, are we talking about a one-sided offense today and you just do not look wherever Surtain is? Is he that good?
I mean, he was that good against Las Vegas. He was really, really excellent. And, one of the plays that stuck out to me is, they're running a flea flicker, right? And, usually there's a little bit of indecision. The DB's eyes get a little bad. There's space. There was zero separation between him and Devontae Adams. And he was consistently doing that. Now, you talk to some people in the building, and they're, pretty adamant that, he's getting away with holding. He's not doing what he's supposed to do. That should have been a penalty. I don't care, man. I don't care even if you are holding. That level of coverage is very, very challenging. And I know PFF came out and basically was like, he's the second best cover corner in the NFL, kind of leading into the season and after week 1. So I think that should give you some context for where he is at from a production standpoint based on PFF's metrics, which I think are actually pretty consistent in terms of kind of grading players. I don't think it's always accurate game to game, but I think if you look at the aggregate of the season or an aggregate of 2 seasons, you're kind of right on the money there. So I think he's excellent. I don't think you want to totally shy away from him completely, but he is very good. He's very, very good. And like that's basically what happened last week. Is it was like that half of the field was dead, and then the backup corner, number 27, his name is I don't remember.
Damari Mathis.
Damari Mathis got cooked by Jacoby Myers. So that's kind of what's going to happen. Something very similar could happen today, but I don't think you can completely not throw at him. You got to kind of run your offense.
You better what is it? Measure twice, cut once.
You're exactly right. Yeah, you got
type of
pick your
discipline.
Moments.
If you're Sam Howell going that way, especially John Dotson, better than Jacoby Myers, I think, on the aggregate. So can he do what Myers did to Mathis last week?
Myers was excellent last.
He was.
To be fair, he was excellent.
Yeah. All right. So that leaves Simmons, who we should still talk about, and there's another opponent that we haven't talked about yet either. That is the altitude, and the Commanders are taking a very unique kind of approach to this week, playing at altitude, one that I had frankly never heard before. So we will discuss that decision next, as well as Justin Simmons, the all-pro safety for the Broncos, and what the Commanders can do to be careful and not let him have an outsized impact on the game. Grant Paulsen at 4 o'clock, then we pick it and say goodbye, hand over to the in-game show coming up at 4:25. It's the Take Command pregame show live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor on a burgundy and gold game day. When you look at Sam Howell's day, there's obviously some good. There's obviously some yikes. When you look at his decision-making, though, let's start there, and then we'll get into some of the protection issues. But decision-making wise and kind of how he executed the throws that he was asked to, what'd you make of his day?
Yeah, so I don't want to come off like I'm being like overly optimistic about Sam Howell's performance. Like I want to ground this in some sense of reality. Like, can he play better? Like, absolutely. But I actually thought he played pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, it was like a good first outing. I know he had the pick. I know he had the fumble. The pick, I thought, like, we just watched that together, and I think that he was, just a little bit late, or his footwork was a little bit off. Like, it just didn't seem like the timing of the depth of the route matched up with his feet necessarily. And because he's waiting so long to throw the football, obviously the ball gets tipped and then gets picked off. And then on the sack force fumble, I don't necessarily think that's anybody's fault. I think, obviously Wiley gives up the sack, but that's a great rush by Gardak right there at number 45 for the Arizona Cardinals on the spin move. And it's a tough look. The guard and Wiley are kind of on different levels and leaves a little bit of space for the inside move. And then Sam's just trying to make a play probably when he needs to know that, like, I don't need to do that right there.
Yeah, that would be my thing on the fumble, is that the fumble is bad because time score situation. Like, you got to be okay punting, and you just got to. It's not to your blind side. You saw it coming. Just eat the football and make sure that you get it onto the foot of Tressway there.
Yeah, but I think we both agree with that. And I think that's what you get though with young players. You get, like, I think that people forget, like, people want him to come out and be like this amazing football player right away, and I think he's doing a pretty good job.
Last guy to mention real quick, Antonio Gibson. How concerned are we about the fumble?
I mean, it is concerning because it just seems to be like a consistent thing with him. Like, I like him. I like him as a player. I think I like him as a person. He's awesome around the building and stuff. But like in any offense, like, ball security is job security. Like, that is something that is so, so important. And for that fumble to come in the red zone, like as you're going in to score, it is a big deal. And he's running hard. Like, he's doing everything you want. I think he makes a nice cut on that. But I think he's going to get less touches, like if that continues to be an issue. And EB's always been very good, at least in my experience with him, about coming back to guys after they have an issue, and, Gibson catches the screen in the fourth quarter that ends up being like I think it was an 11-yard gain.
Yeah, it should have been a first down.
Right.
The referees decided that they were going to have a terrible day, so it wasn't.
Right. But, he's going to be a productive member of this offense, but, like, I don't know if he's going to get, I don't know if I think what I think is potentially in the future here is Rodriguez get more touches as on the first, second down type of ballpark that would have normally gone to Gibson, and then Gibson kind of moves into that satellite player role kind of exclusively. So it's week one. I'm not a guy to overreact, but the fact that there's this kind of fumbling history in Gibson's past, like makes me a little bit like, come on, like we got to get that cleared up.
Take Command pregame show. We are live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. The Commanders fans starting to pile in thick here, Logan Paulsen, as they are getting ready for the 4:25 kick between the Commanders and the Broncos. Early games coming to a close. Some good ones. Green Bay 24, Atlanta 22. Packers trying to run out the clock. About 7 minutes left in that one. They've had a good day on the ground, even though Aaron Jones is out, something I wish I had remembered when I set my fantasy lineup this morning. You're welcome to whoever is playing me. Bengals are driving, trying to catch up with the Ravens, who are 10 points clear with 4 minutes to go. Last check of the KC Jacksonville game, about 8 minutes to go, 17-9 to the score there. And then I don't see any other games on in the sports bar right now, as Red Zone is apparently on one of the games that is actually on in the bar.
Right.
So we will get you more scores as we go. So we were just talking about Justin Simmons.
Oh, my gosh. Jumped off sides on 4th and 1. How about that? The Green Bay did on a quarterback sneak. The quarterback jumped off sides.
That's brutal.
How about that?
Young quarterbacks, man.
Wow.
They come with their own set of challenges.
Yes, geez.
Like, what do you do if you're Sam Howell and you're facing Justin Simmons? See how I got us right back on track there.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Apparently.
That's a wacky bit.
Love thought it was on 1. O-line thought it was on 2. He snuck. The problem was he didn't have the football yet. So, what is Simmons as a player? We know he's great. We know he's really fantastic skill-wise, like level-wise. But what is the specific skills that make him so good and so dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy that, oh, my gosh, the whole marching band is here right now.
Commanders Major Tuddy in the building.
Major Tuddy, look at that guy.
Justin Simmons, focus, Logan.
A lot going on in here.
There is.
Justin Simmons, he's a guy that reminds me a lot of Cam Curl, actually. Like, they're very, very similar. They both wear 31. They're both about the same size. They're both very physical run players, while also having this ability to kind of be very dynamic and instinctive in the back end. So if you want to know what Justin Simmons is, look at Cam Curl and just say Justin Simmons has more ball production year to year than Cam Curl usually does.
I was going to say, the biggest difference without a question is their production from the turnover standpoint. Yes. Simmons, one of the NFL's leaders the last couple of years in interceptions.
Yes,
like, is
20 in the last 4 years.
Does he just cover a ton of ground, great ball skills? Does he break on routes well? Like, where are these interceptions coming where Sam Howell has to look out for today?
You know, it's funny, when I watched the game, I was kind of like, he doesn't look like he looks like he's a box player, because that's how they were utilizing him against Las Vegas. But when you look at his other stuff, it's not like he's crazy fast, or he's a good athlete, obviously. But to me, it's just he's one of those guys who's got great instincts. He has great instincts for the football, great instincts for the route concept. Does a good job of being home, and very similar to Cam, very, very similar to Cam Curl in that regard. And I know he obviously turns the football over more than Cam does, but it's that same type of skill set, kind of unassuming a little bit, but he makes a lot of plays.
Yeah, that's Logan Paulsen. I'm Craig Hoffman here on the Take Command pregame show, live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor, where, again, the atmosphere picking up just 30 minutes from kick. So here at sea level, we look out at Denver. They got to deal with the altitude.
Yeah.
I have never heard of, hey, we're just going to go out there for less than 24 hours and basically pretend the altitude doesn't exist.
So that's not why they're doing that, I don't think.
Apparently, what Ron said at the podium was, when you're out there for less than 24 hours, it doesn't affect you.
So
what's the logic there?
So I actually had I talked to a sports scientist who worked with the Navy SEALs, and what he was saying was basically that they only go out 24 hours maximum before an op, right? So if they're on site, like in Germany, they go out to Afghanistan, where they're going, it's 24 hours. And I said, well, why do you do that? He's like, your internal clock does not adjust to the time change in that 24-hour window. So in a perfect world, you'd want to get out there so you're not like groggy or a little disoriented, not because of the altitude necessarily, but because of
time change.
Because of the circadian rhythms of your body, right? It doesn't have time to get back. So you'd be groggy instead of Sunday at kickoff, which is, I've felt that a million times in my career. You're kind of like, man, I feel a little lethargic. I'm not quite there. You don't feel that. You would feel that on Monday when you're back in Ashburn, hopefully, right? So
right.
I don't think it's an altitude-related thing. I think it's a sleep kind of rest, circadian rhythm thing as opposed to, like altitudes.
Okay, so that's great.
Does that make more sense?
It makes more sense than the altitude thing.
Yeah.
Because the altitude part, when he said that, and I thought it was altitude related, it sounded like sticking your fingers in your ear going la 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 la, and hoping that it was going to be fine. And news alert, it's not going to be fine if that's what you're doing.
Correct, yes.
But I didn't know if I was missing something. Obviously, Jake Sankel's had a big week. Jake, their nutritionist, lots of talk about the beet juice that they get. It gets more nitrates in your body.
It's a vasodilator. Yep.
Yeah. You want to talk about that? So that's probably a different
That's
show.
probably a different show. But basically, they've got all these tools, like,
right.
Even like a good pre-workout or caffeine, for example. They help kind of increase the amount of oxygen your blood can take in, and
right.
the nitrates like you're talking about.
Which is important because there's less oxygen available in the air.
And so I've used it before. It might be all placebo, but it does seem to help, kind of get yourself more, like, less fatigued, I guess. So
right.
They have tools to help with the altitude and stuff.
So when you played out there, like, the thought amongst NBA players typically is that if you can just make it to the first media timeout, you'll be all right. Like, you adjust. You're going to be short of breath the first 5-6 minutes of the game, and then you kind of adjust the rest of it. For an NFL player, as your experience out there, of course, we talked on one of the podcasts this week, your bigger problem was not the altitude, it was Von Miller.
Yes, correct,
but for the altitude portion, is it something that actually really matters when you get out there? Because it's funny, they have all these signs, they're like, warning, altitude sickness.
Yeah.
Altitude sickness is real. They use it as an intimidation factor. But once you're out there, do you think about it?
It's funny. It's like I remember going out there, it was 2013, and doing the warm-up and being like, I'm like kind of, and it wasn't so much I was out of breath. I just felt like it was so dry. It was hard to breathe. And so I went back in the locker room. I talked to our nutritionist at the time, and he was just basically like, try this beet juice, and we'll put a little bit of this other thing in there and see how you feel. So I did that. I went back out for warm-ups, waited about 45 minutes, and I felt, I don't want to say fine, but pretty close to fine. You know what I mean? So, like, it was, you did feel it, but I think there's enough science now around it, and enough, like, if you can get past the psychological element of it, that it's not that big of a deal. Like, and is it a factor? 100%, or else I wouldn't have to do all this other stuff to kind of prep for the game. But I think they have enough of that stuff that they can kind of manage this at a higher level than they could even 15 years ago.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, that's Logan Paulsen. I'm Craig Hoffman here on the Take Command pregame show. Again, don't forget, after the game, about 90 minutes after kick, somewhere around 8:30, 8:45 tonight, or it's 90 minutes after the final whistle, 8:30, 8:45 tonight, we will reconvene for the Take Command postgame show, which you can catch on YouTube at 1067 The Fan and the Team 980. Up next, Grant Paulsen joins us for his weekly pregame hit. And then we will pick the game and hand it over to Denton and Linnell for the in-game show on the Team 980. That is next here on a Burgundy and Gold game day.
And now Marcus Stewart for...
Was it Cincinnati?
That's not depends on the story, but maybe we were playing Cincinnati.
So Logan catches this touchdown.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Cincinnati. Yep.
With Cincinnati. So we put in this play, and it was like, I think we called it Hoss Juke or something like that. I can't remember what we called it in that offense, but Logan's on a seam, right? So he's our vertical threat, taking the top off the defense.
Digging out, guys.
we're talking in the week. I don't think we ever said it in the install with those guys, but they're like, listen, Logan's not even in the progression. He's taking the top off this thing. We're trying to work this little option route down. And they bust this coverage. And I mean, he is screaming wide open.
I wasn't even supposed to be on the
shit.
play. They were supposed to sub somebody else in because I thought I was too slow to run this route. Just for the context here for everybody.
So he's screaming wide open. And I'm like, Matt, throw it at his back shoulder. You might hit him in stride. If you try and back shoulder him. Threw it right at him. He catches it. It was an awesome touchdown. Just the celebration afterwards was so much fun. For me, it was always fun celebrating the touchdowns with the guys that didn't score them all the time. You know, like
take that, Julio
like,
Jones.
Yeah, and I'm not, I'm saying that, but like your role for us was you did the dirty work, and when you see guys that do the dirty work get rewarded for it, that was really cool. Something I'll never forget. The caveman, man. The caveman was in there in the end zone celebrating. It was awesome.
So there was this play where we call it like it was, what is it, 19 Zorro. So basically like versus a 3-4 structure with an outside linebacker who is Von Miller in this case, I would get help from the fullback, like on inside help. So I could be really aggressive on my reach, really violent to the reach. And so it was me and DY, is a physical son of a gun. And so we take Von Miller and we put him, like, no joke, in the water cooler. Like, we put him way out there on the sideline. And we were like, this guy ain't nothing. Like, we're going to, we were so fired up. And so it ended up being like a 25 or 30-yard gain. So we were all fired up. And then Kyle's like, all right, let's come back to it. So, like, 2 plays later, we're running again, and we're running to the right. And I was like, oh, man, we are about to tee this dude up real quick. Just tune him up nice and good. And so I go out to get him, and I'm firing off the ball. My hat's low. I'm flat back. And I swear to God, like, he was about as close as my hand was to my face, and he just disappeared into, like, mist. And he, like, swung me, and I fell right on my face. And I just was like, oh, my gosh. And, like, I went back and watched the film, and it was crazy how quickly he was able to, like, do his little basketball weave and then, like just disappear from my vision and get inside and make the tackle. And I was like, oh. So now he's upset. So then the next play, I'm like all tentative and nervous. And I felt like Vaughn did. I watched this on film, so I knew he did this. But he does a really good job of, like, kind of like playing it like a boxer a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, kind of rope-a-doping you a little bit. So, like, he lets you get one, right? Where I got after him. He makes you look like an idiot. And then the next time I was super tentative on him, and he literally did like a double stick, like he was going to make me miss, and then just grabbed my neck and then threw me over the pile. I was like, man, this is going to be tough. I got to, like, think of a plan here in the next 15 minutes so I don't look like an idiot for the rest of the game. But, when you're playing elite football players like him, like, there's a reason they're elite. So if you get one on them, it's probably because they want. They probably because they're letting you get one.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. It's a trap.
It's the Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day. We're live on the Team 980 on YouTube at 1067 The Fan and at the Team 980. And, of course, we are live and in person. You can come hang out and listen to the show, hang out, watch with us, talking commercial breaks as we watch football, et cetera, at Tap Sports Bar, where we are at MGM National Harbor. Logan Paulsen there, Craig Hoffman here, and joining us on the old Comrex is our pal Grant Paulsen. GP, how are you, sir?
What's going on, fellas? Happy game day. How are we?
Doing well. Trying to keep Logan focused as we're in the witching hour. It is a task, man.
I have an 85-inch TV, 11 or so inches from my face right now, with a quad box going. So If I get distracted and I'm unprofessional, I'll apologize as well. The NFL is just the best, by the way.
Yeah.
All these games are coming down to the wire. You got 2 games in overtime. You got the Packers and Falcons within 2 points under 2 minutes. Every game right now, it seems like, is entertaining. This is great.
It's great. Although, if you have an 85-inch TV, 11 inches from your face, and a quad box, I feel like you need to scoot back so you can actually see 4 boxes. Grant, you're missing action.
I think I am. It's actually something we've been debating all day. I've been moving my couch back and forth, and my wife's kind of helping coach me up on how far away we are. I would say I like to be super close to the TV, so I'm actually more like 5 feet away, but I still think I need a little bit more.
That's still pretty
space.
close,
Yeah, we need some spatial awareness training here. We'll worry about that later. All right, for you, if the Commanders are going to win today, it's because what main thing happens?
I think if they win the football game today, they avoid big plays defensively. I think they take away some explosives from Denver. And that's not something really, frankly, that I'm overly worried about with this offense. But I think if you make the Broncos go on long, sustained 10-plus play drives, they're going to commit the holding penalty that puts them behind the sticks. They're going to have something go wrong where they're, 3rd and long. And I'm not sure, frankly, offensively, if they're a good enough group in game number 2 under Sean Payton wanting to run the ball like they do, that they can overcome that. So if there's no big chunks, if you're not giving up, a 45, a 50-yard explosive, or a run that gets ripped off for 35 in a field goal range or something, I think that points are going to be at a premium, and you're going to make them earn everything.
Totally agree. I think, for me, I think one of the big storylines is Sam Howell, how he handles this game. Obviously, this Denver defense is a completely different animal than what they saw week 1 against Arizona. What's the expectation for him?
Yeah, I think, number one, it's going to be arduous because you're on the road. I've told you this when we talked this week, Logan.
Yeah.
I don't know what your experiences were as a player. I heard you guys talking about the altitude. But specific to the environment itself, of all the games I covered, and there was a time after one cycle of 4 years on the beat where I'd been in all but 4 stadiums, Denver was the second loudest NFL stadium I've ever been in.
Very loud.
Seattle was louder, and maybe that was just confirmation bias. I don't know. But I felt like being there, that was the loudest I can remember. New Orleans was up there, certainly, but I think Denver was probably number 2. So it's his first road game. He's obviously played in some huge games on the road in college in front of 90,000 plus, but this is just a whole different beast. The speed and the decision-making and the processing that has to happen. So I think this is a big day for Eric Bieniemy, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, they got to run the ball. They got to have some success doing so at some point. I still like the idea of throwing to set up the run like
there
they did
he
last
is.
week.
There's our guy.
Well, but it'll settle down. I mean, I'm saying like 34% of the time.
No, yeah, let's get there. Yeah, let's be clear about it.
Right. Having said that, I think that it's got to look different than last week. I don't want the longer developing drop back stuff that we saw a lot of. I think that was game plan specific. I'm looking for quick game, help him get the ball out of his hands. Wear him. I know you're not a big wide receiver screen guy, but just get the ball out in space.
Yeah.
Let guys try to make some plays. I would also avoid Patrick Surtain as often as possible, and I would try to involve Jahan Dotson, against their number 2 corner as frequently as I can. I think it's going to be a big day for Dotson.
Grant Paulsen's with us here on the Take Command pregame show. I think it's interesting, Grant, listening to fan feedback this week, whether it's the YouTube comments that we get or the calls that we take on the shows, and kind of watching the fan base rediscover what it's like to have a young quarterback. When you think of what Sam Howell is now and what he could be, like where do you think he is in the, obviously it's very beginning from a chronological space in the progression, but when you think about where he could go and the areas that he needs to improve, like where are you at on his progression so far through training camp and obviously putting it to the test week 1?
So I think you said that really well, right? I mean, I think we have to remember where we're at in this process and that you're now back into the developing a quarterback mode here as a fan base. So I think Sam Howell, we're at a phase where I want to see him make really good plays mixed in with some of the bad that is inevitable. I'm looking for flash moments. And frankly, the phase I'm in right now, I'm looking for traits. I want to see athleticism and play extension and creativity out of the pocket and some poise, but also the big arm and accuracy, like all the stuff. I'm checking boxes right now. All right, can he process information quickly? Check. Can he be accurate short and intermediate? Check. Can he avoid back-breaking decisions? Can he get you out of the huddle and maybe out of some bad looks occasionally? Like all of those things, more so than results, as far as the process goes, is where I'm at. I think you said it well, Craig. This is a point of time where if you're just viewing him through the same lens you do an 8, 9, 10-year veteran quarterback and you're grading him on the same scale, I think you're missing it. Having said that, I'm seeing all of those things. Like, there are things he's got to do better. He's going to have to get the ball out faster. Frankly, going back to North Carolina, he was one of the quarterbacks who took the longest time to throw the ball and had one of the worst sack rates of QBs that have been drafted over the last 15 or so years. And that is my one big concern with him. So that's the one thing, game in and game out, I'm going to be harping on constantly. But I want to see a juxtaposition of big-time, big boy stuff with some of the very amateur mistakes that are going to come when you're a neophyte who's played 2 games. And so far, I think he's far kind of outperforming where you would normally be. If I'm watching like Desmond Ridder and guys like that today, Sam Howell every single week looks every bit as good as any of these guys with more experience. So that's where I'm encouraged.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that too, because I do think he did show enough last week to kind of give you optimism, even though there were some warts to kind of what he was doing. In terms of the offensive line, obviously road games for the offensive line are extremely challenging. I don't think the offensive line was as bad as people seem to think that they were. We talked about this week that this week on your show. What's your take on that group, and what do they need to do today to secure the dub?
Well, I think the first thing is if they're running the ball more effectively, which they couldn't get the run game going at all, I think it'll help them. Just because it's going to allow for them to kind of be more balanced, and defensively the Broncos can't tee off, number one. The second thing is I do think that you're going to see time to throw improve. Last week, they had the bottom 10 time to throw in the National Football League. If you look at next-gen stats in terms of how long it took to get the ball out of Howell's hands, some of that was him, and some of that was, I think, the design against the Cardinals. They didn't necessarily fear that pass rush. So I think on the road in a loud environment, when you know that the defensive edge rushers are going to get off at a quick rate, I think you're going to get the ball out faster. But, yeah, I would say offensive line-wise, I'm with you. Like, people look at the 6 sacks. I think one of those was probably on a tight end. A couple of those were on Howell. I would take that performance most weeks. I guess my anxiety and nerves of that game come from the fact that it was the Cardinals.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of respect for necessarily like how many pressures and sacks those guys are going to get this season. So I almost bake in, okay, if you play like that every week against a Dallas or fill-in-the-blank team, the results are going to look worse. But I think the key for me is going to be, it's not just running the ball, but it is staying ahead of the sticks. It can be the short passing game. But I just think they've got to stay out of obvious passing downs, because that's when I think they're going to have big problems. They're just not going to hold up that well with their personnel right now in those areas.
All right, last thing for you, GP. Obviously, I don't get a chance to listen to your show very often because I'm on
Why
the
not?
radio.
What are you busy doing?
Same time. But I can just hear in my head Danny yelling about Chase Young and he's a bust and this, that, and the other thing. I'm just guessing that happens from, knowing Danny for a long time. So let me ask you this. For those that have had laser eyes on Chase Young and been waiting for him to come back and be the hyped guy that he's supposed to be, what does he have to do today? Does he have to not just play and survive the game and be moderately effective? Does he have to get like 2 sacks, or is him getting through the game going to be enough to quell some of the pressure on him in this contract year with all the things that have transpired the previous 3?
Yeah, I mean, so let's be fair, right? If people have decided he's a bust, there's nothing he can do today to, fix that. And also, I think that they're being silly. He was the defensive rookie of the year in his first season, and he was hurt with a torn ACL. Now, if you want to say he's been massively disappointing over the last couple of years when he's been on the field, I think that that's totally correct. If you want to say, you'd like there to be more of a less talking about how good he is and more seeing him go out and make plays, I'll sign up for that, absolutely. I think when you listen around the country, the conversation about him just does not match the performance, right? This is a guy that looks more like James Smith-Williams a lot of the time than he does Nick Bosa. I want to see some Nick Bosa. So I guess the answer to the question is, for the conversation to be really positive about him tomorrow, he's got to make 1 play. That's where I'm at. And that's where it's so unfair to be a tackle. I mean, think about it. If you're out there for 53 snaps and a guy gets home for a sack, whether it's a sack, fumble, or not, tomorrow the conversation is Chase Young's on pace to have a sack every time he plays. I think if he has a big play in the passing game, I expect a TFL. I expect him to be very good helping set the edge in the running game. But if he can get home in the passing game, hit a quarterback, create a turnover, do something, of all the reps he gets, make one big play in the passing game, I really, truly believe it's going to be a very positive next couple days for him. And people want to support this guy. Like, they bought his jersey. They were fired up. He was the most hyped prospect they've had in years. People want to see it. They're just tired of not seeing it.
Yeah, definitely a lot of Chase jerseys around here at Tap MGM. Let's get your pick, and then we go enjoy the game. Who you got?
Famous last words here, fellas. I'm already regretting what I'm about to tell you. I got the good guys in the win column.
Oh, all right.
I definitely like them to cover. I think it's a field goal game. I think this reeks of like 2017, maybe 23-20. So catching that extra half point is big for me. But I'm going to say Commanders win the game 23-20, and I think Jahan Dotson goes for 100 yards.
All right. That's a couple predictions from Grant Paulsen there. For more analysis, you can check he and Danny out tomorrow afternoon, 2 to 6:30 on 106.7 The Fan. GP, thank you, sir. Enjoy the game.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, bud.
All right, that is Grant Paulsen. When we get back here on the Team 980 and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 and 106.7 The Fan, we will pick the game. And then it is time to hand it off to Denton and Linnell for the Burgundy and Gold in-game show. That is next here on a Burgundy and Gold game day. When you look at Sam Howell's day, there's obviously some good. There's obviously some yikes. When you look at his decision-making, though, let's start there, and then we'll get into some of the protection issues. But decision-making wise and kind of how he executed the throws that he was asked to, what'd you make of his day?
Yeah, so I don't want to come off like I'm being like overly optimistic about Sam Howell's performance. Like, I want to ground this in some sense of reality. Like, can he play better? Like, absolutely. But I actually thought he played pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, it was like a good first outing. I know he had the pick. I know he had the fumble. The pick, I thought, like, we just watched that together, and I think that he was, just a little bit late, or his footwork was a little bit off. Like, it just didn't seem like the timing of the depth of the route matched up with his feet necessarily. And because he's waiting so long to throw the football, obviously the ball gets tipped and then gets picked off. And then on the sack force fumble, I don't necessarily think that's anybody's fault. I think, obviously Wiley gives up the sack, but that's a great rush by Gardeck right there, number 45 for the Arizona Cardinals on the spin move. And it's a tough look. The guard and Wiley are kind of on different levels and leaves a little bit of space for the inside move. Then Sam's just trying to make a play, probably when he needs to know that, like, I don't need to do that right there.
Yeah, that would be my thing on the fumble, is that the fumble is bad because time score situation, you got to be okay punting, and you just got to, it's not to your blind side. You saw it coming. Just eat the football and make sure that you get it onto the foot of Tressway there.
Yeah, but I think we both agree with that, and I think that's what you get though with young players. You get, like, I think that people forget, like, people want him to come out and be like this amazing football player right away, and I think he's doing a pretty good job.
Last guy to mention real quick, Antonio Gibson. How concerned are we about the fumble?
I mean, it is concerning because it just seems to be like a consistent thing with him. Like, I like him. I like him as a player. I think I like him as a person. He's awesome around the building and stuff. But like in any offense, like, ball security is job security. Like, that is something that is so important. And for that fumble to come in the red zone, like as you're going in to score, it is a big deal. And he's running hard, like he's doing everything you want. I think he makes a nice cut on that, but I think he's going to get less touches, like if that continues to be an issue. And EB's always been very good, at least in my experience with him, about coming back to guys after they have an issue, and Gibson catches the screen in the fourth quarter that ends up being like I think it was an 11-yard gain.
Yeah, it should have been a first down. But
right.
The referees decided that they were going to have a terrible day, so it wasn't.
Right, but he's going to be a productive member of this offense, but like I don't know if he's going to get. I don't know if I think what I think is potentially in the future here is Rodriguez get more touches as on the first, second down type of ballpark that would have normally gone to Gibson, and then Gibson kind of moves into that satellite player role kind of exclusively. So it's week one. I'm not a guy to overreact, but the fact that there's this kind of fumbling history in Gibson's past, like makes me a little bit like, come on, like we got to get that cleared up.
Wrapping up here at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen, and we are the Take Command pregame show. 90 minutes post-game. We'll be back on the same interwebs, not on the radio. We will have our post-game show with Doc and Linnell on the Team 980, but on YouTube at 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. Logan and I will have our post-game podcast, which we now live stream as well. Then make sure that you are subscribed to Take Command and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app, wherever it is that you listen, and you can get the analysis there if you miss the live stream. Of course, our other two podcasts throughout the week, the film breakdown coming up midweek, and then the preview of next week's opponent each and every Friday morning. All right, Logan, that's enough housekeeping. Let's get down to business. Players to watch, key to a game, and a prediction. Start off with a player to watch.
Player to watch, man, this is tough because there's so many guys that I think are going to be impactful to winning this football game if the Commanders do. I'm going to say Montez Sweat, and I think I like his matchup the best. I think also the other one that would be interesting would be Deron Payne, because I think both those guys draw really favorable matchups on the offensive line. They're going to run the ball a lot, like we've talked about Denver is. But in those passing situations, can you exploit those matchups? Can you get the ball out? Can you do what they did last week and kind of take over the game? And I really think that's something that I'm going to be watching with both eyes open. How about you?
I'm going to watch Jahan Dotson.
Oh,
because,
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Because I think there's a chance he has a real big day. Like, for all the huffing and puffing we've done about Terry, there's a reason defenses are going to focus on Terry and why we think Jahan is going to wind up being the leading receiver in terms of at least reception numbers this year for this team.
Sure.
So can this be a day where he's got 8-9 receptions for 110, 120 yards and a touchdown? Like, I think that's really possible for him. So Jahan Dotson, certainly a big one. Because, I also think there's a little bit of overreaction of they've got to run it, they've got to run it. Like, that's just not philosophically the way Eric Bieniemy thinks about football anymore. Now, he did say this week, he's like, Andy got to me a little bit, but I still have my running back in me.
Sure.
I will go back. But, like, he realizes that the short, quick passing game is the best way to open up a defense, and that those opportunities are there more on first and second down because you are getting simpler coverage structures because defenses have run responsibilities.
Dude,
so
100%.
I still think they're going to pass the ball a fair amount today. A lot of it will be short, quick. Sam's going to have the marching orders to get the ball out quickly. The big question is, can he do it? All right, so those are our players to watch. Most important thing today for a Commanders win, key to the game.
Key to the game. Key to the game. Key to the game. It's something we talked about at the top of the show, and I think it's something that is going to be important for the rest of the year, so I feel a little bit like I'm cheating pointing this out, but can Sam Howell get the ball out of his hand quickly and be efficient and protect the football? Like that, that's really what it comes down to, is can he grow from week 1 to week 2, improve on some of the things we talked about, taking what the play is giving you, don't try to force the ball down the field, Get the ball out of your hands in under 3 seconds. It should be closer to 2.5, honestly.
Yeah.
Limit the stress on the offensive line, especially in this road environment. I think that's going to be absolutely enormous, and I think he'll have opportunities to do that. I think, like you said, Jahan's going to have a really favorable matchup in coverage. I think Logan Thomas will have a favorable matchup in coverage. So exploiting those for him so that he can kind of mature and grow each week.
Yeah, I think one thing that I maybe overrated this week is thinking about this Denver pass rush a little too much.
They're not. They don't pop the same way. Yeah.
Like what Randy Gregory is capable of is a monster day
Yeah.
because he's super talented, but this is not who he's been typically through his career.
Yeah.
And Frank Clark, who's did not have a good camp, and
he's not starting for them.
But he's not right. Well, he's not playing at all today
Yeah.
because he's out. But like the idea of what Frank Clark was at his peak,
Correct.
I think was a little too in my head. So there is obviously opportunity for Sam Howell today. Look, this has become the new analysis. Like what's the key to the game? Don't turn the ball over.
Yeah.
The new one on that is don't give up explosive plays defensively. So it's, again, not very original, but I do not think most teams in the NFL, nevertheless, this Denver Broncos offense can put up like in the 20s unless they get a couple of explosives against Washington's defense. I don't think they're good enough, especially with the pressure the Commanders' D-line will put on their offensive line to not commit a holding penalty, to give up a sack, a tackle for loss, and get off schedule. So I think that is huge today for the Commanders and a big challenge with Russell Wilson off schedule to do that. All right, we got 50 seconds left in the show.
Shoot.
Who you got?
So, obviously, fan of the team, want them to win. I just feel like Sean Payton going 0-2 at home doesn't feel right to me. So I'm going to say 24-20. I'm going to pick 24-21, I'm going to say, and I think the Denver Broncos are going to win the game.
It is a little scary what I'm about to say as I look up at the screen and see the graphic. Sam Howell, third career start. Russell Wilson, jersey number 3, 175th career start. But I really do like the kind of formula that I think Washington can win with, and I like it specifically against this team. So I'm going to take Washington 17-14. Ugly,
love it.
But a win. All right, Denton and Linnell have you from here for the in-game show. We'll see you after the game on the Take Command post-game pod.
Team 980 and the audit.